Hello, folks, and welcome to another episode of Log Talk with Pert Near Outdoors. This is your host, Billy, and it is episode 86 coming at you, dropping here on February 1st. Hard to believe that January of 2021 is already behind us. Seems like it went pretty darn quick, and happy to be heading into February. This week's episode is going to be with Mike Edwards. He is pretty interesting guy. He lives right here in Western New York, over in Springwater, so over south end of Hemlock Lake, that area between Canisius and Hemlock. Pretty close to the stomping grounds where our family, where I grew up, and where my family hunting camp is. So it was cool to connect with Mike. Mike's name might sound familiar. He is a representative from the National Deer Association. Used to be QDMA. So I really wanted to get with Mike. I had met him back in the fall when we were doing our that beer project that we did. Wanted to do something to benefit a conservation organization surrounding deer as we were heading into deer season. So I ended up getting in touch with Mike to see what we could do to help, and he's the one to put me in touch with Greg First of the Venison Donation Coalition. So been a long time coming to get this podcast together. Finally had the chance to go sit down with Mike at his house. He's got a pretty awesome office right off the front of his house on his front porch. It's all, obviously all sealed up to the weather and looking out over his property and over the valley. It's a pretty awesome spot. So really appreciate Mike having me over. I look forward to continuing to build our relationship with him and help out both the QDMA, NDA, help them out overall. Whatever we can do to help, obviously big picture wise, but on the local scene here too. You'll hear Mike talk about, we kind of hit a little bit on the number of members that we have here in New York, and it's kind of a staggering number when you think about it. When you really drop the numbers of how many people belong to an organization that champions and supports what all of us that are hunters, the majority of hunters are deer hunters, and so there's probably close to, I have no idea what the number is of deer hunters in New York, but let's just say it's 100,000. I know it's probably way more than that, but let's just say 100,000, and there's only 2,700 ish right now that are members of the National Deer Association from New York. So definitely encourage you out there. If you are, you'll hear us talk quite a bit about what the organization has to offer. I have been directly engaged with them, a member for a year now. Not quite sure exactly why it never came to the forefront, but much like the like NWTF, was been a member there for many years, basically just because I went to a banquet. So hope to definitely get more involved as we talk about. I keep beating dead horse there, but great organization and happy to be working with them. Keep your eyes peeled. We're trying to figure out the details, but I think we're going to do some sort of a shed hunting contest for the remainder of the winter and into the spring to lead us up to turkey season. So keep your eyes peeled with that. Mike and I talked a little bit about that and when we got together end of last week, and going to try to figure out the details. But I think we might be able to do something pretty fun and coordinate with some people that we've made connections with over the last year doing this podcast. So keep your eyes peeled for that, and that will not be something that's only for people from New York. So I know we've got people that listens from other states, and you are all going to be welcome to participate as well. This is not just a New York thing. So keep your eyes peeled for that. I hope to get the details brought together by the end of the first week of February, so we can officially have the contest up and running probably around, I guess maybe the second week of February. We really need to get this thing going because bucks are starting to drop their horns. So got that cracking. It was a good weekend, kinda. It was daddy daycare weekend. The wife had to work on Saturday, and I let her, listen to me. She wanted to go skiing today with her friends, so she went skiing with her friends today, and I hung out at home with the kids again and was able to sneak out this afternoon and get a couple hours in working over at the farm. We're doing a bunch of bunch of tree cutting over there, and we got talking, as you'll hear Mike and I discuss. We talked extensively about pruning and helping take good care of apple trees. So we've got a bunch of good old apple trees over at the farm that have just gotten overgrown by ash and by buckthorn and honeysuckle. Stuff like that is just choking these apple trees out. So that's one of the projects we're working on this winter over at the farm, is trying to thin a lot of that kind of useless timber out and try to get some good underbrush growing, as well as give those apple trees the sunlight they need to produce. So pretty excited about that. And I think the last thing I want to hit on here, and it's something that Mike and I talked a little bit about in the discussion, is just everybody in, well, I don't really need to beat on this because I talk about it here, and I think I've talked about it in past weeks, but for whatever reason, it's just got me real focused of late, that everybody in our community, in our hunting community, really needs to focus on what we're trying to achieve as far as maintaining our ways of life, respecting each other, respecting the sport, welcoming new hunters in and showing them the right way to be a hunter. And there's always some bad eggs on the ship, but we want to make sure we're looking out for each other and policing our own. And if you see something that somebody's doing that makes you uncomfortable or frustrated, or you think would discourage people from looking at us in the outdoors, whatever it is that you do, whether you're a hunter, you're a fisher, you're just a outdoor recreator, we got to keep our eyes peeled. And I'm just saying that because I feel like, I listened to a podcast and I referenced it in here. Chris Rowe was on with Aaron Snyder. It was like a 4-hour podcast. And then I listened back to Chris's own podcast. He did his most recent episode was just him going solo and just kind of going off. And whether you agree or disagree with Chris's politics or his ideas, something that really stuck with me, that I ended up talking a little bit with Mike here, but we didn't really dig into it too deep, was just, the people that get things done in this country are the people that show up and the people that do things. And there's a lot to be said for that. And that was one of the things I took away from Chris's kind of his rant about everything that's going on, was that we all need to realize that. And, we want the people that are showing up to be representing our community the right way. And I don't know what I can do about that right now sitting here. I've never actively participated. Don't know if I have the time right now to actively participate. But to the point I brought up to Mike, was I was just kind of curious, how an organization like National Deer Association, how they represent their members and what they do to go to these meetings or these hearings, and exactly how they ask of their constituency, their members, what their members feel about certain issues and certain things, and then how does the organization represent that. So I feel, from what I've seen and what I've heard, I feel like National Deer Association does a pretty good job with that, but it's something that I think that everyone should keep an eye on with the organizations that they belong to. A lot of times you join an organization so that you have a voice, because the organization would hopefully have the number of people that belong that can actually make an impact when there's something coming down the pipe. And as you've seen, and we've posted up a couple things recently where you've got a couple different pieces of legislation in different states that are being pushed. One in California to ban bear hunting, which is a scary thought. We know that New Jersey in recent years has banned bear hunting, and it's just kind of crazy to think about that, and we sit here in New York and think, never us, it can't happen here. But it could happen here. You get one group of people that get real worked up because they see a video or they see a picture or they see something that makes them uncomfortable, and it can really quickly change the future of what we love and what we live for as hunters. So I really encourage everybody to kind of take a moment and think about that. And when you see these issues that are going on in other states, even though it's not in your backyard or it may not be a place you ever plan to hunt, that can pretty quickly spread. And that can end up happening in your backyard too. So just keep an eye on that. Stick up for each other, stick up for your fellow hunter and outdoorsman, and I think we can keep this lifestyle healthy, keep it good, and make it last for a lifetime and carry it on to the next generation. So there's my my soapbox for the week. Hope you all have a good one. Stay warm and keep feeding them.
Hello.
Yeah, that's your
Yeah.
name.
Squirrels got me.
Big Jim.
Yeah.
Really, 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 really cold and fun.
Cold and fun.
Cold and fun.
That's good that you think that of it, because that's what deer hunting typically is cold and fun.
Yesterday morning, I'm glassing up on the pass and I see these deer moving, and I'm like, ooh, there's deer moving. All of a sudden, I just see this person just head down, just hauling ass, wearing shorts and a t-shirt with a pack on. And I'm like, is that Tard? My dad always talks about floating through the woods like the autumn breeze.
So Robert's
When you're
the ghost, and
275
what's
pounds, I don't know how you do that, but
the Freightliner. It's just like a creeper. You're just kind of up in the corner watching what's going on down there.
yeah.
You know,
He's like,
he's up there slapping it, pissing all over everything.
is it warm yet?
How did you know the name of the actor?
That's right. I know.
What'd you say his name?
Hervé Villechaize. Remember this?
You know what pert near means.
If you know what pert near means and you live in America, you're a redneck too.
Welcome to the Log Talk Podcast, brought to you by Pert Near Outdoors. All right, we'll get her rolling.
All right,
Mike Edwards, how are you?
I'm good, bud. How are you?
Good. Sitting in the most beautiful. Today maybe doesn't have the scenic view of the vista here, but it's a pretty awesome spot you've got sitting in your office here.
Yep, it's definitely a nice view. It's a balmy 20 degrees out there, but
Snowing.
snowing.
Can't see across the other side of the hill.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just it must be lake effect off of Lake Ontario. I'm guessing what's going on.
Yeah, I think so. The next few days seems like we're going to get a couple inches here or there.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, you guys got a fair amount. You must have gotten it last week too when we did. It's pretty interesting because I travel all around the territory. I cover the whole Finger Lakes region for my day job, and it's amazing how like you just drive in and out of it. Where I was hiking over towards our camp, would it be last Thursday? There's like almost 2 feet of snow, and you go down the hill towards Honeoye, and you get down where it's lowland towards the north end of the lake. There's like maybe an inch of snow on the ground.
yep,
It's just
same
great.
thing will be here. I'll be up here on top of the hill, and
Yeah.
you drive down into the next village, which has got to be 6 miles down the hill, and it's just green grass.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's definitely strange. But this winter, you can't really complain. There's not been much snow, and it's a little worrisome in terms of the water table and stuff with the drought that we had last year. But
Yeah.
I think we'll probably make up for it in February and March. So
Hopefully. Yeah, we definitely do need the rain. It was very interesting seeing how, it's nice not having a nasty wet summer, but then you get to the fall, and when you're wishing that you had some precipitation to get it's actually kind of nice when the fields are wet and everything's a mess because the farmers take forever to harvest everything. So it makes the hunting a little bit better. But
yeah.
so why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, kind of who you are, I'm interviewing you because you're representative for National Deer Association. So that's what has connected you and I. But kind of introduce yourself, where you're from, where you live now, and.
Sure. I'm from Western New York. I live in the big city of Springwater, New York, and I'm the assistant director of Grassroots for the National Deer Association. So I've been with the organization that was formerly known as QDMA for about 7 years as a staff, and I've been involved with the organization as a member, life member, volunteer for about 15 years now, total time. So,
what got you involved with the organization originally?
So when I first met my wife, and this was dating myself, but probably 12 or 15 years ago, well, closer to 15. We were at her place, and we both worked at the University of Rochester from the medical field. I'm a registered nurse as well.
Oh, are you? Okay.
Yep, that was what I did in college, and that's how I met my wife. And she's a nurse practitioner now, but we met each other in the ER at Strong. So, but I was at her place, and I was watching TV. I was watching the Sports Channel or the Outdoor Channel, and Quality Whitetails TV came on, and I was like, what is this? At the same time, I was looking for my place that I live at now, my farm. And I knew I wanted a place. I grew up above the Adirondacks in St. Lawrence County, and I knew I wanted a place that had some land and a house that was in decent shape but needed some work. And kind of an old farm so I can hunt and get back to my roots, which was important to me. So I happened to catch quality whitetails, and I was like, what is this? And what is this, QDM, and what is QDMA? And what really turned me on was the philosophy of I'm not just a consumer, and more of a manager. Not that I'm going to manage my deer herd, and you can manage deer, obviously, but, for a guy that owns 80 to 100 acres, I'm going to have an impact on my ground, but it's not like it's going to be dramatic. It's not like I have thousands of acres that I control, but more of the aspect of I can be involved. I can make the habitat better. I can have an impact on the deer herd and the health of the deer herd, the quality of the deer herd, and actually give back and be just more involved rather than just taking hunting season just from a month or two out of your time, or maybe just a weekend for some guys, but make it more year round in habitat techniques and giving back and leaving the place better than I found it. And that was really what excited me about the organization was converting, just from a consumer more into being more involved on a one-to-one level with the ground that we're blessed to hunt.
Yeah. So I would assume you joined your organization as
so I joined as a member, and I was a member for a long time, and I'm going to guess it was probably 2010, 2012 maybe. There wasn't a branch in my area, and branch, same name as chapter for other organizations. So it's the local grassroots that volunteers that are on the ground that do local events. And I looked in my area, and there really wasn't an active branch in my area. So I reached out to the organization and said, hey, what do I have to do to get a branch? And basically it's, get like-minded individuals like yourself together and, get a meeting together. We can talk about what the organization does, what it takes to have a branch, and, do some good things locally for the organization and for the community. So I started, searching around, talking to my buddies. I have mutual friends, obviously, that hunt and are very passionate. And most of them were familiar with QDMA at the time. And talked to them and said, hey, let's do this. So we started the Rochester branch, and that was in 2012. At the same time, I became a life member of the organization just because I believed in what they taught, just the education that the organization has done over its 32 years, even though we've changed. And it's not our first name change. We've changed our name over the course of time, over the years. But the past 32 years, there's not an organization that's done more for deer and deer hunting and education than QDMA, which is now the National Deer Association. So at that time, became Deer Steward 1 grad, took Deer Steward 2, started the Rochester branch, ran the Rochester branch for 3 to 4 years, became the state president for New York, which the State Advisory Council in New York essentially provides support and mission-related work to the branches in the overall of the organization. So each state where there's multiple branches has a State Advisory Council, and they help out kind of supporting the organization and supporting branches. So then with expansion of the organization, there came an opportunity for employment. And I said to my wife, I said, hey, I got to talk to you. And she's like, oh, okay. So she asked me if I was having my midlife crisis early because I'm going to leave this. Yeah. I was getting paid really well at the university. I'd been an RN. I was working for 17 years. I ran the robotic surgical program for nursing at Strong. So nice. I was doing really well. I loved the job, loved the surgeons that I worked with. 27 surgeons across from 7 different fields. So things were good, but I was passionate. I'm a passionate outdoorsman, loved deer, and just really what the organization did, I was passionate about. So I said, I think I should apply. I'm one of those guys. I put my mind to something, I can do it, and I have the confidence to do that. So she said, okay. So I interviewed and I got the job, and it's been a great ride. So it's that's how kind of it all started. Was way back when, watching Quality Whitetails TV, learning about the organization, and what people need to understand about the organization is, even back, more so probably when it was QDMA, is people just get focused on specifics about QDM, and they don't realize that it's about herd management, it's about education, it's about doe management. It's just not about big bucks. It's about the first deer, it's about the spike, it's about everything. It's about deer hunting, and that's where people really get kind of miscued, partly on ourselves and partly on just some misrepresentation, but more so of just the people not willing to take the time to learn what it's about. Yeah. And once they encompassed really what the organization was about, then most people were like, yeah, man, these guys are doing it. And some of our programs, as you know, are fantastic. So.
Yeah. And for me, that was my perception all along. And I've literally been a member for 1 year because I just never really understood what the organization was about. And my perception was always, it was all about, like getting big bucks. That was what QDMA was all about. You drive down the road, you see a sign by somebody's property that says, quality deer management and practice or whatever. You're fine. You can drink that. You're all right. And if you spill on it, you got to buy it. But like that was my perception. And then once I started paying more attention, and I heard some, like you were talking about, like Kip and guys like that on podcasts, you start hearing them talking about some of the things that the organization's working on. And it was, it kind of struck me. I was like, wow, it's like that speaks a lot to the things that I'm interested in and my passions, and how it's interesting. I'm sure you can relate to this. So like as you get older and you do buy a house, or you get vested into, whether it be a family farm or you have your own family property and you have kids, like all of a sudden your perception of things, like taking care of something and making sure it's there for the next generation, like your perception of that stuff changes. And like for me, that was a big piece. And then, joining up a year ago with you guys and, getting the magazine in the mail and reading the articles, like I think it's one of the best magazines. And maybe it's just because I've become extremely passionate about deer hunting, but that magazine, it gives a lot of value in there. Like it's not just fluff articles just to get an article out. It's talking about things you can actively do to your property or in your community, or stories about people that are getting started in hunting, like you said. And I don't know you've been with the organization long enough. I don't know if you feel like kind of the image of the company has changed over the recent years to target more of that, or at least put more of that out there to the general public, that it's not all about, to your point, like how big the buck is.
Yeah,
how
for
many
sure.
acres you have, but
yeah, I think any organization or, any business for that matter, the story that you tell is important. And I think that we've done a good job at all the good work we've done in telling that story, but I think we can always improve on it. And I think that, in the last couple of years, especially the last year to 2 years, we've done an exceptional job about getting the programs out there that we're doing and how we're making an impact. I mean, that's vital. It all comes down to mission and mission delivery. And that's what our Grassroots program is all about, is doing the things, whether it's field to fork with hunter recruitment. Education is huge. There's no other organization that I feel, especially related to deer, that does the education that we do. And you're right. The magazines, you look over there in the corner of my office, there's every magazine that I've ever had for a long time, and they're a great resource. There's articles in there from folks like you and I who may not be biologists. There's articles in there from biologists. There's articles in there from grad students and research biologists and foresters, and all sorts of good stuff in there. And it's about deer and about deer hunting. So if they're passionate about it, certainly it's a great magazine. I love Quality Whitetails, and that's the name of the magazine. It comes out 4 times a year. So with the membership, you get that magazine, and it's phenomenal. It's absolutely packed. I've actually got an article in there on apple trees that was written I think it was published in 2012, and that's some of my experience of stuff that I've done here on my farm and stuff. So that was when I was a volunteer. So really, it's a really cool organization and a really cool magazine if you're a deer hunter, and most of us are deer hunters. So
yeah, well, I want to put a note on that to come back to apple trees, because
sure.
I figure what we'll do, kind of continue chatting a little bit about the organization, but I want to kind of come back around, just BS about stuff that you're working on here or things that are going on regionally. But we talked about change. So you guys have obviously gone through change over the last year. The major change being merging with National Deer Alliance. So you want to talk a little bit about, what that change has meant and what it's done from the outside looking in, especially, I'll take a step back from the personal side. Our company, our business has gone through a ton of change in 2020. And I learned a lot from that personally, because I learned that you got to take a step back sometimes and look at the big picture and look at the longevity of things. So yeah, there was a lot of changes made around me, but emotionally you take a step back and you kind of see the forest through the trees. And I did the same when I heard that. There was a lot of people that would get all excited and say, oh my God, what they doing? What's going on with this? But we take a step back, the reasons from what I read and what I've heard and understand about why the organization did what they did makes a lot of sense to me. But if you want to kind of explain, what the transition was and what the merger was all about between the two organizations.
Sure. So the National Deer Alliance actually was formed by QDMA about 5 or 6 years ago. And, it was an organization that did a lot of good work, a lot of good advocacy work, went to a lot of high-level meetings, Nick has actually got experience, on Capitol Hill, giving testimony on different stuff. And obviously QDMA has a long storied history of 32 years of being the organization that it was. But, we went through some changes. Obviously, we knew we needed to make some change probably a couple of years ago, just knowing that we need to change and become more modern and progressive as an organization. I think, any group or business that just kind of just sails along at the same way, you're not going to continue to rise. So you've got to make some changes and adapt to the modern times and stuff. So at the same time, the old CEO was retiring, and they needed to look towards trying to find a new CEO, and they looked at what that organization did and what our organization did, and obviously Nick has a lot of good experience, and there's a lot of overlap with some of the stuff that both organizations did, and at the same time there were some very unique things. So looking at both organizations, the powers to be thought, if we merged these two organizations, we'd have one big, lean, modern organization. So that's the Cliff Notes version of kind of what has happened. So from that, the name changed. Now we're the National Deer Association. So, the acronym is still NDA, but obviously the buck and doe silhouette of our logo is going to remain the same. That has a lot of good history, and I like it because it shows, that buck and doe is importantly very important to the management of the wild deer herd. Really, the other big changes for us from QDMA to NDA is now we're going to be more encompassing of all deer species. So, primarily whitetails, because that is, the number 1 hunted species. It's by far the largest deer species. But we still, more so on the advocacy side of things, are going to get involved with, mule deer advocacy work and other deer species, in North America. So it's been good. There's a lot of positive energy. The experience from the advocacy side is huge that NDA brings, and obviously the experience and the staff and everything that QDMA brought together is just a large, good force.
So a merger between the two that, it seemed to make good sense. And how do you say Lick? Jesus, how do you say Nick's last name?
Pinizzato. Yep.
Yeah, he's not Italian, is he? Yeah. Yeah, it's cool, and I think one of the things I'm curious about, being that the organization's new, and you said that he's done a lot down on Capitol Hill and politically going and speaking for the members. I'm curious because I'd heard this talked about in another podcast. I'm just curious, because I'm new to QDMA, so I haven't had a ton of experience. But how do you guys typically, if you have somebody like Nick going and representing all the chapters at a meeting or at some sort of a hearing, how does the organizations, how do you guys kind of catalog where all your members are at on a certain issue? Let's just take something small, not nationwide, but like New York State wise, where you have, you've got all your chapters across New York State. Roughly how many members are there here in New York? Do you know?
Somewhere around 2,700.
2,700. So you got 2,700 members. How do you guys engage with them to kind of get, there's some new legislation that the state is, we know there's a new deer plan. How do you kind of, who represents us from QDMA or NDA? Sure.
So obviously, Nick, Kip, and then, Kip Adams, and then obviously Torin, he's our policy.
Torin is?
Yep. He's our policy director. So basically how it works is we're science-based. So everything that we're going to approach when it comes to deer-related issues and hunting issues, we look at the principles foundation of the organization and then science-based. So the biggest thing that I think that we can do, and we've done this in New York, and I don't know if you've received any of the emails that I sent, but we like to alert our members about issues like when the deer plan came up, or when certain issues come out that DEC is asking for public input, getting that information out. And then oftentimes we will, send emails out to our members asking for their opinion on stuff. So, and if 75% of our hunters said that, deer aren't brown, and we know that deer are brown, obviously we're going to say deer are brown, right?
Right.
But at the end of the day, the biggest thing that we can do is to engage our membership, let them know that these issues are out there, try to give them our stance or our science behind it, and then have them be engaged at the level. There's a lot of misinformation out there when it comes to deer management, and there's a lot of things that people don't understand that might be regulatory that the DEC control, and there's things that the DEC can't control, that it has to be done through legislation. Sometimes I have to look to see which things fall under there. So I think the biggest thing that an organization can do is to help educate and notify and get involvement from sportsmen, because at the end of the day, it's all this men and women that partake in our sport and our heritage that really make a difference.
Yeah.
And having them being engaged and knowing the different sides of things, it's hard to get everyone to agree on one thing. But we're always going to be, in general good of hunting. This is very broad terms, but definitely science-based in the way that we go about things. So
yeah, everybody likes to say science-based nowadays. And it's so funny how that gets thrown around, and it like automatically gets people's dander up, It's like, well, we follow the science. So it's like, well, what's science? Like, I was, my wife and I had a conversation in passing yesterday morning where I listened to a podcast with Dan Crenshaw, and he's a Republican, but he's got, he gets all different people on. And this guy's talking about, how the earth overall is physically greener, like leaf-wise. He's saying that it's greener now than it was 100 years ago. And, like, my wife overhears me saying something I'm talking to Dallas on the phone. I'm saying that comment to him. And she's like, stops in her tracks and looks at me. She's like, what are you, no, I'm like, Sarah, I'm like, you can't even say that stuff anymore without people getting excited. But, little tangent there. But, I think it is very important for, and it's good to throw the number of how many deer hunters are there in New York State. And there's only 2,700 members.
Yeah,
so
there's roughly, and my numbers may be off a little bit here, but 600,000 deer hunters. So, there's only about 4% of the U.S. population hunts. About 78% of the American public support hunting if it's done legally and ethically and for food.
Mm-hmm.
So, when we talk about our right to hunt, it's a huge deal. When you look at it from a conservation side, only about 1% of deer hunters actually belong to a deer hunting conservation organization.
Yeah.
And these numbers are a few years old, but when it comes to turkey and ducks, it's 40 and 60%.
No kidding.
So it's pretty remarkable. Now, deer obviously have not had the population decline that you saw with ducks and with the turkeys, and they don't have the migratory issues that those the ducks had. So there's definitely some challenges there. But deer hunters need to be involved and support an organization that's going to, bring the education and bring the advocacy stuff, to the forefront. There's a lot of concerning things going on, in hunting and in the outdoors, and it's important. I think deer hunters, I was raised, above the Adirondacks, and I remember going to deer camp with a bunch of guys and, staying in the cabin with a creek running underneath. And, you'd go out and get your pop out of the creek and,
right.
The camp cook would cook for everybody. And that was a great time. But deer hunting is slowly turned in more to a more independent kind of sport. And that's sad because we all love the whole deer camp mentality. Yeah. That's what it's about, it's the memories. So, we get caught up in all this kind of stuff and think it's just kind of, just us, but it's not. It's everyone. It's sharing the woods, sharing the time, whether it's processing venison with your buddies after you got your deer or whatever it might be. That's really what it comes back to. But when you look at those numbers, about 78% of the population supports hunting. If it's done for the legal and for meat wise, we need to be conscious of that effort, and we need to recruit more hunters, and we need to be concerned about education and we need to be worried about advocacy and all those important things, and those are all items that are right in our forefront.
Yeah, I think it's super important that we like you bring up the 2,700. I would be willing to bet that a good portion of those 2,700 people are also members of the other, whether it be Ducks Unlimited or NWTF or Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, probably the same sort of people. They do see the value in that, but it's. I just feel, and I've heard this, and I'm just regurgitating it, that in this day and age, it seems to be there's meetings going on, there's things happening, there's people that are showing up to advocate for, whether it be pro-hunting, anti-hunting, change this rule, change that rule. And if most people are just regular old Joes and they are deer hunters and they just want to be left alone, they want to go to their 100-acre property or go to that piece of land that they hunt, just leave me alone. But if my fear is, and I'm regurgitating this. Chris Rowe had I don't know if you know who Chris Rowe is. He's a guy from out west, but he's property manager, biologist, and he was talking about how it's just like we as a group, hunters, need to come together, and we need to start showing up, because the people that get things done in this country are the people that show up. And if we're not engaging and we're not going to these meetings, or we're not belonging to organizations that are speaking for us, if I don't have the time to go to some public hearing, I better well belong to an organization that has the voice to speak for me and has the members to speak for me, you know? So I just think it's important. My perception, especially with everything that's going on in this country right now, my perception is you need to make sure that you belong to any of these groups that speak to what your passions are, because we got to make sure we protect it, and we got to make sure we come together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that, there's some cultural things that happen, that I've seen across the U.S. in terms of supportive conservation, and some generational, gaps in different things when there's, a history of, whether it's going to a sportsman's banquet or supporting an organization this way, or actually getting involved, things evolve and change.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm optimistic, things are growing for us. I've started 3 branches here just since July. I have another 3 that are ready to be started here just in the next month, just waiting on some meeting dates and stuff. But getting people involved is definitely an important thing for any organization, and any deer hunter should be worried about. Yeah. Being involved and being updated, and getting the material and the education and getting the understanding, and just supporting the greater good of what the organization is doing. When you look at that 1% that belongs to a deer organization, we need to change that. We're deer hunters by far is the largest group. Yeah. Deer pretty much funds, when you look at the conservation model of this country, deer is the driving force behind
100%,
it.
Yeah.
Deer should be on the forefront of it. Another area of our concern and focus is herd health and, CWD concerns. And right now we have no known cases of that in New York. And I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe we're the only state that has had an outbreak, which there was in central New York. We seem to contain it, and it's not had another. That's like the only one. So we need to do whatever we can to keep CWD, out. Yeah. Part of that is educating hunters, getting them the information. And it's science-based. What are the best practices that we can use to keep our states safe? We can't stop it. We can slow it.
Right.
That's, but a lot of research dollars need to be spent to try to combat that disease. EHD, there was an outbreak in New York down in Orange County.
Yeah,
they lost wild. Thousands of deer. I had a lot of members contact me, and, it's, these are the things.
So yeah, what exactly is EHD? Like, what? I don't understand it. CWD is something that's talked about all the time, but EHD is something that's, obviously we had the outbreak here, but not real familiar.
Sure, yeah, hemorrhagic disease or EHD, it's a virus that's spread through a small midge. It's like a gnat insect, and generally it strikes in a narrow season of time, typically during summer or early fall when the midges are most prevalent. So. Drought years can have an impact, and from what I recall from some of the education that I've received, and again, I'm not a biologist, but I've certainly around this stuff all the time and been to conventions and seen lots of presentations and absorbed all the materials and quality whitetails. But the disease has been slowly moving to the north. Typically, it was found in the south, and then it's just been slowly moving to the north. And it seemed like every decade, I remember seeing a map, it seemed to go farther up. And I believe there was some outbreaks just a few years ago in Ontario, just outside of Buffalo, in Canada, but just above the border there. So, CWD by far is worse than EHD, and deer can survive from EHD. Deer cannot survive some DWD. Deer herd health is extremely important, and deer hunters are intricate to deer habitat health and deer health. They may not look at it that way. They may look at it like, I'm going to go hunt, and I might shoot a buck today, but I might shoot a doe, and that's it. But when you look at it, we are a tool. Mm-hmm. We are going out there and we are helping, keep the herd healthy, keeping the habitat healthy. So we have forest regeneration. So we don't have, species of hardwoods that are just decimated and have no no regrowth. We keep deer numbers in check. We keep more forage available by keeping deer numbers down. We keep deer numbers down, which then, of course, keeps disease numbers down just based on the way that it is spread. So deer hunters have a direct impact on deer herd health, excuse me. So, getting educated and understanding those things, and whether you want to, be really serious about it or just a novice, at least acknowledge the fact that you have an impact and a part in all of this.
Yeah.
From the way that we take care of following the guidelines and regulations when we harvest a deer out of state, making sure we're not bringing the parts back that could contain the CWD. That's probably the most important thing that hunters can do and understand right there.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's if you're not conscious about this stuff, you don't, like you said, you don't need to be like Johnny QDM out there doing stuff. But as long as you're conscious about what's going on around you and understanding just stuff as simple as what you like talking about, how your woods appears, whether there's clear browse lines or there's no understory or I just totally oblivious to that until I started paying attention to it. And then it's like, oh, that's why I'm not seeing any deer here, because it's too open.
Yep.
But it's funny how if you're not tuned into it, you have no clue what's going on.
Absolutely. A little personal note, so during my time when I learned about the organization and then I became a member, it was like literally right before I bought my place that we're here. And we took, I've got about 87 acres here. And I want to say we took 27 doe like in the first 7 years, which may sound like a lot. And obviously it wasn't just me doing it. I had family members and friends and some new hunters helping me out. But when I first moved here, we had browse lines. You look out back here and where the woods starts right behind my house, you would just see a complete browse line. Everything from your head height down was just gone.
Yeah.
You'd walk through the woods and you wouldn't see any good forest regeneration, maple saplings, oak saplings, just decimated. I mean, it was just crazy. Deer, and this is where hunters really, we have to realize that a lot of people think a quality hunt is when you go out and you see 20 or 30 deer in a set. If you're seeing that many deer, you got to ask yourself, why am I not pulling the trigger? Like, you got to do some reduction here. That's, that's not a normal thing. So we have to realize the big picture, So since I've been able to get those doe numbers down, and I keep track of all sorts of different stats and stand observation and some trail camera data, although I don't really do camera census because we can't bait here legally in New York, so I don't do that. But I have a general idea based on, running cameras over a number of years, and certainly stand observation data is really, really good and where the deer numbers are. And I have a fairly good idea, I think, where my fawn recruitment is and stuff. But, I have seen, the deer numbers definitely get more in check here. I've seen the buck to doe ratio get a little bit better. I've seen the deer hunting get better. Some nice bruisers. All of those 4 guys right there came from the farm. There's others, but, they came from here. I've just seen an increase in rutting behavior, more scrapes, more rubs, more positive response to rattling and grunting based on just trying to keep those numbers in check, So that was kind of my first indication and my first kind of thing when I got here. And I saw all the forest damage was, wow, we got to get some does in check, So there's sits. I mean, there was this past season, there was probably only 1 or 2 sits that I didn't see any deer. So it was fairly good, season for me, although I didn't punch a tag. It's the first time I brought out a new hunter in the past 4 years. I brought him out 5 times for 4 hours apiece. And the only thing I could get him in front of was 2 fawns, and he decided not to pull the trigger. We talked about, it's okay to take a fawn and how that might impact, but he just didn't want to do that. I respected that. Mm-hmm. I practice QDM here. The guys that hunt that can count points and have experience under their belt, I basically just use an 8-point or better rule. That's just my personal thing. Personally, my personal choice is 3.5 or older. That's because I've shot a lot of deer now, and I'm okay. I don't have to fill a tag. I don't have that burning desire that I have to kill a deer. I enjoy deer hunting and I want to get a deer, but I don't have to have a deer every year.
Yeah.
So I'm just at a different spot in my life with hunting many years and taking some really nice bucks. I'm at just a different spot. I've evolved as a hunter. There's a normal progression that hunters go through. Mm-hmm. I'm just at a different spot than some people.
Yeah, we're not there yet.
Yeah, But my new guy that hunted with me, he could shoot whatever he want.
Yeah.
I mean, I've literally, if he wanted to shoot, a spike, he can shoot a spike. So hunted really hard, and I feel really bad for him. I mean, The 3 years prior, I brought out 3 other new hunters. Each year I bring a new hunter out through our Field to Fork program. And literally the first day we got them their deer that they hunt with me. Sometimes it's opening day. Sometimes it's the day after. We just base it on their schedule and stuff, and kind of what I'm seeing, on my place here and stuff. And this poor guy, we hunted a lot and couldn't really get it done, but I've committed to him next year. I'll still help him get his first deer, because that's what it's about, passing it on, passing the torch, if you will. I was fortunate, I don't know if you grew up in a hunting family, but my brothers hunted. My dad fished. My grandfather fished. My dad was in law enforcement, so we were around firearms, and then, I was taught correctly, but he really didn't hunt too much. But my brothers did. So they're the ones that really took me out under their wing. I remember going, small game hunting with them to start, and then graduating into deer hunting. And, my brother bought me my first bow, and, all those memories that I have. A lot of people don't have those memories. And, there's a lot of people out there that want to learn how to deer hunt, and they just don't have someone to bring them hunting. So, the Field to Fork program is our adult hunting program. Youth programs are fantastic, and it certainly is a good thing, and we're always going to be involved with youth programs and youth hunting programs. But the research shows if we want to maintain and have hunting survive, we got to get new adults in the sport. Yeah. Adults are in charge of their lives. They have in charge of their decisions. They have the income to hunt. And there's a lot of folks, especially with the food movement, they want to know where their food comes from. They want to be a part of that process. They want to be involved with the whole field to fork, if you will, process of taking an animal and then consuming the animal. And there's a lot of people out there that can learn how to hunt, maybe through going to hunter eds, and become a safe hunter. We have a great program through Calcami, through Today's Hunter, called Deer Hunter 101 that we created, where it's really, really good, and a lot of people have used that. That's a really great program too. But actually spending time with them and bringing them on a mentored hunt is really what it's about, and where we're going to make a difference. Yep. So we could talk more about Field to Fork if you want to go somewhere else, or we can continue. But
it's kind of flowing that way. Might as well.
Okay. So, the program, I think for New York, started about 3 or 4 years ago. Rochester was the first branch that got on board. I think the year prior, I brought someone out on my own and got them their first year. But typically in a non-pandemic year, we would do 2 Hunter 101 classes with them. We seek people that want to learn how to hunt. Our first year, we went to the farmers market up in Rochester off of Goodman Street near the railroad there. I can't remember. I think it's just a Rochester Public Market. Yeah.
University Ave, maybe?
Up there.
Yeah.
And it was all because it's around the food-based type thing.
Yeah.
The interesting thing at the national level, not my branch, but other branches in the organization, we've actually had vegetarians that have wanted to learn how to hunt and became hunters and are consuming meat. Not because they were against eating meat. They were just their
against
personal
the process,
opinion.
Yeah.
It was a process. It was just
the factory farming people,
right.
And I totally can get down with that. Like some of that stuff disgusts me,
Yeah, so I think that's really cool, man. There's just a vegetarian that, you would think as a hunter, right? Especially where I'm a hunter.
Right.
Vegetarians, we look at them like, you guys are crazy, right? But no, I understand now. That was a perspective that I probably didn't have before. But that's a really cool thing. So basically we do 2 deer hunting 101 classes, and this is generally be in person locally. Although you're up in Rochester, we've done some classes down here at my local gun club and stuff. And it's basic deer biology, why we hunt, where you're going to want to shoot an animal. We go over field dressing, what to anticipate on your hunt, what you might need for your hunt. They get to meet their mentor. Then we do a sponsored hunter safety education class. And then we spend at least a full day on the range, and we'll spend more time with the person if they need it. And we graduate them through just shooting 22s, because some of them have a lot of experience with firearms, and other people have never shot a firearm before.
Yeah.
And then if they're capable, we'll bring them all the way through to a 12-gauge slug gun if needed, because of some of the slug areas that we have up in Rochester that we can hunt. So it's a really great program. And then they're paired one-on-one. A lot of the Field to Fork programs and other groups that do the mentored hunts, it might be on a specific day at a specific farm, but we have just found, for at least us, that in New York, it's worked fairly well if we can match people up and say, hey, Mike, you're going to be with Joe, and you guys work your schedules out, and you're going to go on mentored hunts. So then, we actually go out and hunt with them side by side and help them get their first deer. And, the 3 guys 2 guys and 1 gal that I helped get their first deer, I was just as excited going through the process of helping them get their deer than I was when I shot my first deer, or when maybe the biggest buck of the year walks out in front of me. Just that adrenaline and that excitement. I was getting nervous about them and, wanting them to pull it together and stuff. And, to sit next to someone and coach them through, harvesting an animal is pretty cool. You can see them shake. You can see them, hear them breathe. You can almost feel their heartbeat. And, and you talk to them and tell them to take a deep breath and talk to them. And then you can see them. See them calm right down in front of your eyes and pull the trigger. And then the excitement and the emotions that they go through from, wow, I did this to, I did take a life of an animal to now we're going to process and we're not going to waste this animal. We're going to use it. It's really cool.
Yeah.
It's really I can't say enough about it. And it's a great program. I mean, there's so many adults out there that want to learn how to hunt. And think about it. You want to go do something. Any of us can go sit in the woods, but learning deer sign and how to do it safely and give you the most success. But then you harvest this 120 to 180. I don't know. The heaviest deer I shot here was north of 200 pounds. So, say the average
big animal.
average deer for New York is probably, with does included, it's probably going to be around 125 pounds or so. 130. Depending if you're going field dressed or not. But that's a big animal then to have to process. It's a very overwhelming task.
Yeah.
So we generally, the Rochester group, we opening weekend is pretty heavy, and then leading up into Thanksgiving that week is pretty heavy. So usually the Tuesday after the opener is when we would do our processing class.
Okay.
And we actually bring all the participants in together, and we actually process their deer with them.
Yeah.
From skinning to deboning, quartering it up, and
Now,
actually
where do you guys do that? Do you at
Yep. So one of the volunteers
or something, or
so various things. Some of the classes we've held. Bob Rose, the Rochester president, we held some of the classes. His boss was gracious enough to let us use the conference room.
Nice.
We've used the Springwater Rod and Gun Club for the range. They've been gracious enough to open up their range for it. The hunts generally on private property with our volunteers that are willing to take somebody out, and it's all the way from 30 miles even south of where I am to all the way up towards Rochester.
Yeah.
Bob will bring some folks to his hunting camp that he has out towards the Herkimer way. The processing stuff, one of the volunteers has a very nice, it's up near Rochester, near Henrietta, general terms, has a very nice facility. He's got stainless steel sinks and hoists and stuff. And, we teach them if you didn't have a hoist, how you could do it, and all that kind of thing, just because you never know. Obviously, we're not going to all have the best, even my spot here. I mean, I butcher my own deer. I don't really have a great setup. I'm kind of winging it in my barn, in my shop and stuff, and bringing stuff into the kitchen to finish stuff up. But it's awesome. And then typically after the hunt is done, we always share stories. I'm still in contact with the people that I've taken hunting, and they still reach out to me. And but afterwards, generally in January, and we weren't able to do this year, we usually have a culinary social. We get together, we have a nice beverage, and everyone brings a venison dish to pass.
Yeah.
And we just share the stories of the hunt and the excitement of it.
Good old-fashioned wild game
yeah.
dinner.
And that's really what, again, it's the social aspect. It's the deer camp. That's why we do this. It's making the memories. It's being in the outside, enjoying the outdoors, and having those connections with people, and also to our roots and back on what we eat. So
yeah. And I think that's one of the first things that really changed my perspective of QDMA at the time, now NDA. What really changed my perspective was the Field to Fork program. And I really heard about that from Todd Waldron when I first had, I believe it wasn't when I did his podcast. It was when I had him on mine for the first time. This would have been probably fall of 2019. And he was he is active in the, I don't know if
Upper Hudson River
Upper
Valley
Hudson River chapter. And they, of course, won the award a couple years ago for the chapter of the year or the event of the year, whatever, for their Field to Fork program. And that rang to me in the same year in 2019. It would have been 2018, so it would have been the year before. But I have a friend from high school, Connor Holly, that him and I, very good friends, went to college together, roommates, but never ever envisioned him hunting, And after college, he got into hunting, but it was always a solo thing. He didn't have any family, nobody really close to him, so he was out just trying to get it done. But he didn't really know what he was doing, But he's an independent guy. Driven, motivated, trying to get it done. Well, I went out with him one time, and him and I went out and on state land, and it was a beautiful day, opening week. It was towards the end of opening week, so there hadn't really been much pressure, fresh snow on the ground. We ended up getting on. It took us a little while, but we ended up getting on fresh tracks, and we dropped over the face of the hill, and like we're like right behind them. You can tell like there was probably about a foot of snow. They're digging in the snow, and you could tell the tracks real fresh, and they're just wandering around. I'm like, Connor, we're like right on them. And just going through that process with him, he was seeing sign, but he didn't know what the sign meant. And to me, you had asked if I had grown up, my brother and I had grown up in a hunting family. It's like literally since birth we were around hunting. I mean, that's my family, that's our life. So you're unaware of what you know, because that's just all you know. And not that I know it all, but I go in the woods, I see a buck rub, I can paint a picture of what's going on here. You take a brand new hunter, you walk them through the woods, they would probably walk right by that stuff. Mm-hmm. They're not even really thinking to look and say, okay, what does that mean? What direction's it going? Is there a line of them? Like stuff that you don't even comprehend.
Right.
So then going through that process with Connor, and, we end up stalking right up. We got about 40 yards from this deer, and it was right straight even with us. Wind is perfect. Deer's got its head buried in the snow eating acorns, and I'm 5 yards behind him, and he keeps a tree between us, and I kind of talked him through what to do, and he sneaks up, leans out from the tree with braced right up on this huge oak tree, and makes a freaking 10-ring shot on this deer. First time he's ever shot a deer. Thing goes peeling off, and I mean, it didn't go 20. And this deer drops, and he turns around, and it's like, I've never felt that before. It was like, I'm like, this is an experience that I don't know. I just never been here. Like, this is new to me. And it was addicting, and so now I've got a couple friends that the last few years, and especially this year was a really good year for it, took several new people out, both at some of the hunting camps, my brother-in-law being one, but now I would consider him to be a veteran at this point because he's finding success every year on his own, AJ, but he's got a brand new buddy that's gotten into it who never thought he'd ever hunt, nobody in his background. And you bring these guys to deer camp with you, and like they're like kids in a candy shop, like just eating up the energy, all the knowledge, and like now understanding what you have that other people don't, and then giving it back to them. And then having, it's amazing how you throw a set of headphones on and you start having a discussion with somebody, and it goes way deeper than just like standing there. Whatever, like you throw headphones on, all of a sudden a conversation becomes like you're locked in with that person. And hearing from these individuals, whether it be my buddy Jeff Jones, who in his first year ever deer hunting this year shot 4 deer, incredible. But he put the time in, and then there was a bunch of us that put effort into helping him find success. Ultimately, he's the one that had to pull the trigger. But seeing all these people finding the same passion that we do, I mean, it's addicting. And I'm sure you can speak, obviously, from the position you're in, but then doing that Field to Fork program, it's like seeing somebody else start to catch that passion that you have. It's like,
absolutely,
you can't get enough.
Absolutely. And, I get a lot of people say, well, I'm not going to give up my time to bring someone out new to hunt. We have too many hunters in this state, right? Those are common things you hear. And this isn't really necessarily from our members, but just people in general
public.
In general, and I have to remind them that, our right to hunt, I mean, it's important. It's all based on the way that we carry ourselves and our numbers, and also the job that we're doing. And not only
portraying
that,
ourselves.
Right.
Yeah.
We are maintaining healthy populations, not only a habitat, but also the game species, from the conservation end, the dollars, okay? It's the business side of it, license sales, ammunition sales, gun sales, the tax that's involved that goes towards conservation. That's all a huge part of it. So I challenge everybody, especially if you're an experienced deer hunter, we all have to bring people out. We've lost an enormous amount of hunters. I mean, millions of hunters. Now, This past year, it's been publicized that, hunter ed and license sales skyrocketed. So there's been a lot of research done. And from what I've seen so far, the most recent research has shown that, yes, some people came back to hunting and there's a lot of new hunters. One, I think the pandemic obviously made outdoor stuff be safe.
Right.
And also I think people, again, realize there's a good skill in being able to forage your own food. Find your own stuff, harvest your own animal. I mean, that's awesome lean protein, right? So, and people had more time to get outside and do it. So it'll be interesting to see what happens if those license sales continue or they just kind of plateau when we get out of the pandemic. But we can't think about the microscopic view of, oh, there's going to be 2 more hunters and I don't know, all those license sales. Did you see any more hunter? I know there's guys that say they saw more trucks out and more people on public land. I think that's because guys had more time and gals had more time to get outdoors.
There was a lot of people hunting during the week that I normally don't see. Like in my travels for work, I'd be driving by a parking area and it's like, wow, there's a truck there. I haven't seen a truck there in 2 years during the middle of the week, you know.
So it's easy to get microscopic on it, but you got to look at the greater good of what a program like this does. And, you don't necessarily have to be in a program. I mean, obviously, if you're someone that's interested in getting involved, there's multiple ways to get involved, and certainly feel free to reach out to me. But you must know someone. Everyone out there that's listening, someone that wants to hunt. I mean, family members. There's probably somebody in your family that wanted to hunt, and no one's ever asked them to go. And access is certainly a problem. And we have avenues to bring people on private ground, but we can bring people public hunting. Yeah. We can bring people turkey hunting if you want. You could bring someone small game hunting. Get them outside. Show them what it's about. Help them. It's an overwhelming process to go through if you've never done it before. It's you've got to, the whole, see one, do one, teach one. That's what adults, that's how they thrive and learn. But if we want to continue to carry the hunting torch and moving it forward and having the right to hunt, we've got to have numbers. We've got to have people doing the right and ethical things, and it starts with each and every one of us. And bringing someone out and learning them, teaching them how to hunt is really what it's about. It's great. I mean, the emotions that you feel when they pull that trigger, and a little bit of anxiety, and then a little bit of hope and excitement. Like geez, is that her heart beating really fast, or is that mine? Because this is exciting. Their first deer. It's just great, I mean, and I'm sure, we both have young families, when our kids are able to go out and get their first year with us, that's going to be our next journey in that. And then hopefully they'll pass it along, My girls, I don't know, they love going out and checking trail cameras. And, I've even brought them along on, my daughter, she went on a deer hunt this year with me. And my oldest daughter, Violet, she's 8. She sat in the blind with me, and we saw some does and we saw some turkeys, and she watched them, and some squirrels, and some geese flew overhead, and she really wanted me to shoot a deer, but she understands where I'm at, and she definitely would have taken a doe if one had come out, but just the fawns came out. But she just loves it, and she's so excited. She knows that why I keep jawbones and why, and she understands all this stuff. And if someone comes over in the shop, in my barn, I call it my shop, and they see the jawbone there, and if she's standing there and someone says, "Mike, why do you have a jawbone?" she'll explain it to them, and that's just the coolest thing that she's absorbed this. They love to do food plots with me, check trail cameras. I even brought her out on my trap line this year. Awesome. She's so excited. She'd get up on the weekend knowing that she can go with me to check traps. And she's just so excited for the outdoors and animals. I'm hoping that she's going to want to hunt and fish and enjoy the outdoors like I did, but at least she has an understanding about what it's about, and she understands why I'm doing it and why it's important and why we do these things to help the environment and the habitat and the wildlife. So that's really what it's about.
Yeah, if you don't at that young age, like, and that's something that's very intriguing to me because, and I reflect back on my childhood, and I've talked about it on here before, like my brother and I, just like your 2 girls, and my daughter's too young to do hardly anything with, and it's 10 degrees out, but my son, it's like he's with me every time I can take him, and it's worth it to get him outside, especially in his first 2 years. We were outside all the time together. And I know my dad was the same way with my brother and I, but I'm going to say he didn't force either one of us to go with him. Jimmy, he gave up everything to go hunting. Like he didn't play sports. He didn't get involved in activities. He wanted to go to camp with Dad every single weekend. Every 52 weeks out of the year, Jimmy and Dad were going to go to camp on the weekend. Whereas myself, I was more focused on the sports, but Dad never pressured me to go to camp. I liked to go to camp, hunt a couple days a year. I'd go there for opening day, but it wasn't never that important. But then after the sports were gone, it was like I came right back, and I've never asked Dad this, but I'm sure it means a lot to him to see. I know it. Well, I guess I don't have to ask him. I know it means a lot to him for myself to get as heavy into this as I am. And I've almost gone over the top compared to the rest of them, because now it's like I'm traveling out of state. I'm like doing the podcast. I'm like all in on this stuff, where I went from being the one that was doing other stuff, wasn't really interested, and now it's like got freaking issues,
It's a
focus on this
lifestyle,
stuff.
right?
It is a lifestyle.
Yeah.
And I think that's why, you teach your kids, you teach, and even if it's adults that are around you, like I use my buddy Jeff, for example. Jeff Jones, he's the same age. He's 32. He's a year younger than I am. And he's avid golfer, avid fisherman. And I've been kind of picking at him for a couple, 2-3 years now. I'm like, you got to hunt. And then the opportunity came up for this to take the course online back during the COVID lockdown. Well, still in it, but back during the spring. And I couldn't believe it. He sent me a message one day and he's like, I'm almost done with the first test and I'm going to take the archery. They just put that up so I can take it. I'm like, oh my God, he's doing it. And then to see him just go head over heels into that. And now it's like, first off, I feel bad for his wife because now, I'm good friends with her too. So now I've, probably driven another wedge between those two. So he's gone for, 3 seasons out of the year. But like seeing people, find whatever, as long as they can understand what your passion is. And then if they end up coming around to it, that's cool. But just for them to understand, I think that's like a metaphor for everything right now in the climate of the country that we're in. It's like if that vegetarian stops by the booth at the public market and is just interested in what you guys are doing, maybe they don't have any desire to go hunt or any desire to try the meat, but they're interested in your perspective or interested in why you're interested in the outdoors. That's a powerful thing.
Absolutely.
For people to and I'm saying this out loud and it makes me need to take a step back too, and other things that I don't, I'm very passionate about certain things, but what's the other side's perspective? And I think if we're not willing to look at the other side's perspective and have an honest conversation about it, all we end up doing is just butting heads and, ignoring each other and going to the other sides of the room.
Absolutely.
So like teaching it, coming back around to the girls and the kids and everything else, like teaching them a lifestyle. Ultimately, people are going to decide what they want to do. But if you have an understanding of how and why people are doing certain things,
yeah, and I
it
think,
makes the world a better place.
I think there's definitely a lot of stuff going on in the country that you mentioned that I don't want to get into, but yeah. I certainly know what you're talking about. But I think it's happening within sportsmen too, to a certain degree. We get hung up and we sometimes fight amongst each other on the most silliest things, and sometimes we just have to stop and realize that there's two sides to every story. We're not going to change someone's opinion on anything by social media or by criticizing someone, but at least understanding, communication, most of it's listening, right? Mm-hmm. So at least listening to their perspective. You don't have to agree with it. You don't necessarily have to support it, but at least understanding where they're coming from. But as sportsmen, I think that we need to make sure we do come together on common ground stuff that, hunting is good. Hunting should be available for all of us. We need to preserve it. We need to do the right thing. Legal, ethical, humane hunting is what's key. And I think if sportsmen can come together and see the greater good and just take a deep breath, it'll be a good thing for our sport.
For everybody. 100%.
And I shouldn't say sport. It's a way of life.
It is a way of life. But you know what? It can be a sport too.
It is.
There's a lot of people that, of those, let's just say it was 40. I know it was a lot of people last year that took the Hunter's Ed course and that new license sales. Let's just say 40,000 people. The perspective of, oh my God, there's going to be somebody. And I talked about this last week on the podcast with Andrew and Jesse. And it's like everybody's freaking out that like there's going to be so many more people out and your opportunities are going to be worse because there's more people. And like that we all have to admit that's a mentality of a deer hunter. It's like I want more space to myself. But you go back, and I'm all over the place right now, but you go back to when my dad was a kid or when my dad was my age in the early 90s or late 80s, it's like they would go and see tons of deer, but everybody was hunting everybody's property, and they'd walk from here to the other side of Hemlock Lake and didn't know whose property they're on. They're just out hunting, and it was a different day. Mm-hmm. Now everybody's gotten so territorial. It's like, obviously there's property lines, respect that. There's good reasons why you should, maintain your property. Safety is a huge thing. But at the end of the day, it's like, you got to welcome the people in that want to experience it. And we can, to the point you were making, is that we can do a lot of good by stopping the infighting. And I can't remember if we talked about that before we hit record or not. I know we talked about it before we record, but, it's like set your differences aside. If you're a hunter and you prefer to use a crossbow and you're excited that the state's looking to make crossbow use throughout the whole season, what's that going to affect? Like, people get so excited about it. It's like, what's it going to affect? Half my family has crossbows, and none of them have. I don't even know if they've shot any deer with them that they wouldn't have shot with a compound bow.
Yeah.
It's like if that makes it easier for somebody, whether it's somebody who's older or somebody who's brand new to hunting and shooting, and they can go and they can practice for an evening with a crossbow, and they can go out and have success and confidence in the field. What the hell's that hurting? It's not hurting anything.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like everybody's got to just tone it back a little bit and just
and I get why people are worried about, if there's going to be so many more hunters. I get it, right? I mean, if we're fishing on an acre pond and there's 2 of us, or if there's 100 of us with a fishing pole in there, you can understand that.
Yeah.
But the greater good, if we want to have this to be able to pass on to the next generation and our kids, we need to have hunters. We need to have numbers. We need to have good sportsmen and women that hunt legally and ethically to pass the sport on and to continue. The modern conservation model is extremely important, from everything from, habitat management, game management, to the conservation dollars that it generates. It's all based on having people in the sport. And if we continue to dwindle in the numbers this year we had a spike, but it was trending down like millions. We've lost millions.
We didn't make up the
millions
in
of
one year
hunters.
That we can't, right.
In just a very short amount of time. If that was to continue, we could be slowly phased out. You always see, legislation. I believe there's something going on currently with against bear hunting.
Black bears in California,
yeah. New Jersey, I believe.
Yeah, they banned black bear hunting.
So, I mean, these things can happen. And if we think that we don't have a bigger chance of passing this on and having hunting survive, with more hunters that understand, the biggest thing that we can do is educate. And the best way to do that is to actually have them partake. If they can have someone that doesn't look like, I don't know, people have an idea in their head, especially a non-hunter, probably what a deer hunter is. But, maybe it's a coworker that they have a casual conversation and they're like, oh, yeah, I learned to deer hunt. That's going to spike a conversation, and they're going to give a perspective about, no, I was like you. I was like, oh, I can't kill something. I don't want to be Bubba the deer hunter and,
right.
And do all that crazy stuff. But then they talk about their experience, about why they wanted to hunt and why it was important to them in their experience and the positive thing that they enjoyed in the outdoors. And then a light bulb goes off. It's just another perspective. They took the opportunity to learn something. I think that's half the battle is just learning why it's important and the benefits of doing such. So guys, we got to get hunters out there, and we got to bring somebody out. And, I've had neighbors of mine be like, Mike, you're crazy. You're crazy. Opening weekend and you got a brand new hunter. I mean, you work for a deer hunting organization and you're doing it. I'm like, yeah, I'm paying it forward. It's been passed to me. I've had my opportunities. I'm primarily an archery hunter. I do gun hunt, but I'm primarily an archery hunter. And, new hunters can learn how to archery hunt. Obviously, it's a lot more difficult.
Yeah.
Even with, a crossbow versus vertical bow, it's still a lot more difficult. So, my focus has been, let's focus on gun, and if I had one of my mentees be like, I want to learn how to archery hunt, absolutely, man, let's do it, but it's a lot easier to do the firearms approach, especially sharing a tree stand or a shooting house with someone and being able to pull that off and stuff. So yeah, I'm giving up time, and I'm giving up, and the deer's not mine, the deer are on my property. They belong to all of us in New York.
Right.
So I'm giving up some of my time, and I would do this. I would still, if I didn't work for the National Deer Association, I would still bring a new hunter out every year because I know why it's important. It's kind of like just why you want to get involved in the first place. We make a difference. You're going to make a difference if you do this.
Yeah. Amen to that. As we kind of round out discussion on this front, as far as people getting involved, we've talked a lot about the stuff that you guys are up to really on the ground level, helping new hunters. That was the main point of our discussion right now. But what, you mentioned that there's some new chapters getting started here in New York. You don't have to, if you don't want to talk about exactly where they are yet, that's fine. If you want to, that's great. But the chapters that are established here in New York, what's a membership cost for a year? If you want to just cover those things real quick.
Sure. So when you join the organization, you belong to the organization. You don't really belong to there's no membership dues for a branch. So It's currently $35 for an annual membership. Now, there's some different ways you can join. If you just go to deerassociation.com, you can click on the link for join. There's some offers there. There's currently some raffles going on, and there's usually membership specials. Sometimes there's a little incentives. There's a three-year membership that's going to be a little bit cheaper. There will be new membership promotions and stuff coming out, so you always can keep your eye on those. When we get back to a normal way of life and there's in-person banquets with the different branches, you can go to a sportsman's banquet and join that way. Everyone that comes and gets a ticket for that becomes a member. And the good thing to remember about that $35 for the membership, 90% of it goes to programs, membership benefits, and the delivery of mission. Only 5% goes to management administrative, and then 5% we reinvest back into special events and fundraising to promote that. So, a lot of people don't like to cough up that money, but I can tell you just the magazine alone that you get is going to be worth that. Yeah. And knowing that you are supporting an
I thought you were going to say there's a high cost of the magazine.
Work. So, there's different membership levels and promotions going on and different ways you can join. That's the easiest. There's life memberships and all that good stuff too. But by far, just the annual one is pretty simple to do. And, you'll get you're going to get a welcome letter. You're going to get a nice, decal, and you'll get the magazines coming out. And, just going to our website alone, you're going to learn a ton of stuff about the organization, what we have to offer. The website is getting revamped. We got to switch a lot of stuff over from QDA to NDA, and that's ongoing, but it'll take quite some time to get that all switched over. We've pumped out 32 years worth of content. So there's a ton of stuff there, but absolutely memberships. So, and the branch level, there's branches. And if you go to deerassociation.com and then go to branches, you can click on New York State or whatever state you're in. You can find a branch that's local to you. There's contact information there. You might see an area where there's a void, and you can just reach out to me. We can talk about getting a branch going. It's a pretty simple process. We just need to get like-minded individuals together. I like to find at least a fairly good number of people, 6, 7, 10, even more. I've started branches as big as 30 people. I've started them with as many as just 3 people. Getting people that want to have a branch, and we require our branches to do mission work. That's really what it's about. So they help us with the Field to Fork programs, venison donation. They support the Venison Donation Coalition. They do lots of good education and outreach stuff. They'll generally do one fundraising type of event. It doesn't have to be a banquet now. We've changed that model a little bit. If they just want to do an archery shoot or a sporting clays tournament or a simple raffle, we're allowing our branches to do that. If they want to do the full-fledged banquet and that's what it works for them, they can absolutely do that. And that certainly is a proven method. It's just we're opening more doors to make, the smaller branches, or maybe the branch that's been doing a banquet for 15 years and they're just burned out. They want to change it up. Now they can do something different.
That's cool.
Yep. And the good thing about us, and conservation organizations do a lot of good. We're a little different the way that we just do things. There's a huge percentage of the money that's raised that stays right there locally. So, for example, every event that happens in New York, 42% of that money stays there, 40 of it with the branch. So like the Rochester group, I started that branch. I still volunteer with that branch. They have a pretty good budget every year because they put on a great banquet. That money has funded scholarships, wounded vet hunts, the Field to Fork program. They've had multiple well-known, nationally known speakers come in. We've supported research. We have supported youth hunts. We have supported the Venison Donation Coalition with some huge donations over the years. Just tons of good stuff. So those dollars being spent in the community is really what it's about. Branches are grassroots. They're the folks in the community, and the mission work and the mission delivery at the community level is really what it's about. So I can't say enough about the branches of what they do and what they provide. There's a lot of exciting things. Some are so new that are going to be happening just in New York with some of the branches that they have going on. It's going to be really good for sportsmen and women across the state and stuff they're going to do. And continuation of the Field to Fork program, that expanded to 3 branches this year. The downstate branch, they did have to suspend their program just because of COVID.
Everything was going on.
Nobody got COVID from the program, but there was such an outbreak in their area right that time in hunting season. As a group, they decided, hey, so they're just going to reconvene next year. Yeah. And I'm sure we'll get some more branches on board, and partnering with other organizations that want to get involved and help us with this venture is absolutely great. I mean, BHA has helped us in the past. Some of their volunteers have helped us, and that's just fantastic. Again, it's the greater good that matters, So certainly joining the organization is a really good thing to support the organization. You're going to get member benefits out of it. You're going to get a fantastic magazine. You're going to learn something, and then it opens up other doors and further your education. It's going to make you excited to want to even learn more. And we have some other educational opportunities if people are interested in them.
Yeah, like the Deer Steward program. I think that's pretty unique, and I think for the price, I was reading the magazine last night. That's one of the books that we read at night. To the little guy, Bill Dan. I was reading that with him last night, and saw it's not that expensive, right? You can do the online Deer Steward one. I know you're at your computer looking right now.
Yeah.
How much is it to do that online?
So the online Deer Steward currently, if you're a non-member, but you actually get a membership, it's $225. If you're already a member, it's $200. Yeah. So for $225, you can take the Deer Steward one online class, and that's done through Clemson University. It's done by us, but it's hosted through them. Once you get enrolled in the program, you have 6 months to complete it. It's all web-based. There's sections. They're professionally produced. The teachers are all professionals in the industry, biologists and foresters and all that good stuff. And essentially, you're going to learn. Even I took it, and I've been hunting. I was hunting probably 25 years, and I took it, and I learned stuff. So that's an online portion. And then there continues on with Deer Steward 2, and that's an in-person class. And if you go to our website and go to Advanced Education and find the Deer Steward classes, you can see the programs in there. Those are done in person. That's usually over a weekend. I actually did mine at the Doherty's property from North Country Whitetails. Cool. Is where I did my Deer Steward. Was that Deer Steward 1? I'm trying to remember now. I'm dating myself. Ago. Yeah, I'm getting them all mixed up.
Many IPAs.
But just the relationships from that. I mean, I have friends from that class that I took that. I mean, because you're, around the guys for the weekend and learning. But, there's in the magazine, it's online as well, but there's some classes coming up for level 2. There's going to be one in Alabama. And then there's also some,
too, right?
What's that?
Something coming up in Pennsylvania.
Yeah. So those are some in-person modules. They're basically education modules. There's going to be one on Hinkle Farms in Unionville. And then in Pennsylvania, it's going to be at the Bearded Buck Showcase Farm. So that's really cool.
Cool.
So those are some educational opportunities. And really the Deer Steward program, 1, 2, and 3. 3 is more of a kind of a lifetime achievement award for yourself. It's a personal thing. But Deer Steward 1 and 2 are really geared toward teaching you how to construct your own management plan in terms of your property and also just managing deer in general. It's going to make you a better deer hunter. You're going to understand deer biology more than you probably wanted to a degree, but you're going to learn some really cool stuff. And that's really what it's geared for. So people contact me all the time. Mike, I want to learn more. I'm great about this. I just got this property. I always say a couple things. First of all, you should join us. And it's not just because I drink the Kool-Aid and that stuff. I really believe in the organization. It's well worth that. You're supporting a great organization that's doing great things. But look at those Deer Steward classes. You're going to learn something. Yeah. You're going to meet people. It's the networking, the social aspect that we all love. Everything that we do that's related around hunting is a social thing. Yeah. That's exactly what the organization is bringing like-minded people together. Starting a branch, the same thing. The branches that get formed, there's lifelong relationships that are developed, and that's what it's about. It's the good time. It's like-minded people getting together for a good cause and community. And, it's the social aspect. That's what hunting is about. And I think it's so easy to lose that thought. But if we can remember that we do good work as hunters and it's all about community, we'll be solid. Yeah,
for sure. And networking, that's at the end of the day, and we haven't all been able to do anything together in basically a year now. And I'll tell you what, it was awesome when we did the beer event there at Windy Brew, and that's when I first met you face to face. We talked on the phone, but 25 people, whatever, showed up, and it was I don't know, none of us wanted to leave. It's it's you got a bunch of people who are passionate about hunting, deer hunting in particular, and it's just great. Yeah. So you create these communities, you create these networks, and guys like you, we're right here. This is the region that I grew up in, the region that our family camp is in. You're right here. It's something I can learn stuff from you now that we're friends and know each other. I can learn things from you or vice versa. Somebody like Ben Williams or John Teeter, those guys are going to be on a live habitat podcast we're going to do in a couple weeks. I never would have met those guys. They're just names on a social media page. Yeah. And then I start interacting with them, and you create friends. And I mean, we just call each other and talk on the phone just to BS now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like I just missed a phone call when I was sitting here from Chad Draper, lives right over the hill.
Yep.
It's like I'd known of Chad, I'd watched his videos, or I'd gone to his archery shop but didn't know him. And then next thing you know, you get to know somebody, and you just create a little community and a little network, and it's awesome. So
yeah,
it's a reason for people to join any of these organizations, and you're not asking for, you know, when I got here, you were telling me that you're the fire chief here, you know, and I'm sure you've seen how things have changed with the fire department over the years, where now you have all this stuff you have to do as a firefighter, where 25 years ago,
it's not the Bush League anymore. I can tell you.
Not 25 years ago, you know, when my dad was very active in the fire department in Honey Falls, and his good buddy Joel was a fire chief, you know, and everybody, it was just, you were in it because you cared about your community and you cared about that. And that's kind of what I see with a lot of these conservation organizations. It's like for very minimal expense. You know, you can spend $35, be a member of this organization, have a community, and it's not like you have to, you don't have to take all these classes, you don't have to do all this stuff. You can just support the organization, support hunting, support deer, and helping, you know, your money goes to programs where if you don't have the time or the resources, that $35 or any extra money you donate throughout the year helps pay for people to go into these programs or to do these things. And so that's my sales pitch for your sales pitch is people should definitely take a look at what you guys are doing.
Awesome.
And,
I appreciate that. And, you know, I think your number on the event that you held at Windy Brew, and I can't thank you guys enough and Windy Brew for doing that. Yeah. It was a fun time. That was the first time, by the way, that I traveled since the middle of March for work. For a guy that's used to being on the road a lot, it was nice to get out and actually and enjoy it. I think there was close to 50 people there, and it was great. I mean, I had friends come from Buffalo. I had friends come from Livingston County, Monroe County to join us there. And,
that was awesome.
And have a cold beer and talk deer, and it was perfect. Yeah. It was definitely windy at Windy Brew that night.
It was.
But it was a great time, and you know, I thank you guys and Windy Brew a lot for that. And that is, it's what it's about. You know, it's those connections.
It's like this most recent edition of the magazine, they had a page of all the different level of like sponsors or whatever. And I don't know, it just hit me. You know, it's like I look through there and you see the people. There's a lot of people that donated money, but there's not that many people in the grand scheme of things. And for us to know here, granted it wasn't a huge amount of money, but we were able to donate some money to you guys. Windy Brew donated money to you guys, and Windy Brew and ourselves donated money to Venison Donation Coalition. It's not a ton, but it's something, and it feels good. And I'm sitting there looking at that magazine, reading it to my son at bedtime, and I'm going through here, and here's Billy Harvey, which is my name, but it's my son's name too. And it's like, that's pretty cool, you know. I'm like, Bill, there's your name, bud. Mm-hmm. You made the magazine. And he's like, oh, big buck, you know. So it's like, I don't know. It's the sappy part of me being a dad. It makes you kind of look long-term, big picture on stuff, and you know, do what you can to make a difference in your community. And let's be honest, $35 in most people's budgets is something you can easily swing. And if that's all you do is just buy 1-year membership, you know, a membership once a year, that's plenty. So
yeah. It's about community. I mean, the whole fire service side or anything. And again, you know, the National Deer Association, it's a national organization, but it's about community. It's about the local stuff, you know, and we need branches certainly in areas. There's parts of New York that I wish we could have an active branch, but New York is pretty well covered. We have some dynamic branches, and they just do a lot for their community and the greater good of hunting. And that's really what it's about. You know, if we don't take care of ourselves as, you know, individuals, and if we don't take care of ourselves as a sporting community, who's going to? We're going to lose the battle when it comes to the antis and all the other rhetoric that's out there. So we've got to take care of each other and get involved with the community and just support one another. And for sure, bring someone hunting out this year and listen to what someone else has to say, and the world will be a much better place.
Amen to that. How much time you got?
I'm good.
You're good. So I wanted to chat about like the state of the state deer herd stuff, but I don't want to. We've talked a lot of organization and politic type stuff. So I guess for the rest of the discussion here, I kind of want to pick your brain on some of the things that you've done with your property here to improve the deer habitat, and then maybe what sort of stuff you're working on right now being a landowner, having property, what are the things that you're focused on to help your property and the deer,
Sure.
for this upcoming season?
Yeah, so my evolution again started with, joining the organization to become well-rounded and educated. And even when I joined, I felt like I was a good deer hunter and knew a lot of good things, but man, did I learn so much. So on my place, and I've been here, let's see, I think this is my 13th or 14th deer season here. So I've done a lot of work. I think when you get a property or hunting a property, just taking your time and taking detailed notes, stand observation data, trail camera data. What are you seeing? Obviously wind, where it's coming, where it's going, how you're going to get to your stand and how you're not. I get a lot of phone calls and questions about when someone gets a farm and, they're excited. They want to do work right away. And I always say, slow down. I mean, I know there's only so many hunting seasons we have. When I look at my life, and I'm not that old, but I'm like, man, there's a chance I've only got, 20 or 30 more hunting seasons left. That's scary to me, right? Because it's what I love, and they come and go so quick. But just take your time, I think data, and I'm science-based, from my nursing background and then being involved with the organization. I'm definitely a deer nerd, definitely data, but just observation stuff of what's going on with your property. And then I think a chainsaw, timber stand improvement is something that gets overlooked. I was contacted, I think, actually when I was a volunteer. This is many, many years ago. It was a pretty big newspaper in the area. I'll just leave it at that. A pretty well-known reporter. And I remember he wanted just me to do a short little interview. And he said, Mike, what is the number one thing a guy can do if he wants better deer hunting? And I said, buy a chainsaw. He didn't believe me. And he didn't put that quote in there. But I'm like,
really?
It's a chainsaw. It's like totally a chainsaw.
Yeah.
Food plots are great. Diverse habitat, creating edge habitat, transitional zones, cover, it's all great. But chainsaw and having a diverse forest is by far the thing that we need. You need to look at your property and think about the bucket and fill the lowest hole. For most of us, this year we had a bumper crop of acorns this year. It was crazy. The drought has an impact. I'm not a forester, but I understand a little bit about the acorn production. But we had tons. I guarantee if we took a walk out in the woods right now, and I have tons of oaks here, 100 yards from here, I bet you we could scratch the snow off, and you're going to see tons of acorns just left there. So, there's tons of food, but what there isn't is there's not a lot of good cover. There's not a lot of good fawning cover. What is that? Early successional habitat. I'm going in tangents here, maybe not getting specifics on my property, but
feed them.
Feed them. Fawn recruitment. When you look at the fawn recruitment numbers, and that's the number from when a fawn is dropped to that first hunting season in September, 6 months old roughly. Back 15 years ago, and these are general terms, but New York was probably, 0.8, meaning almost every doe had a fawn. Now, and I have to refresh the stats, but I looked at them just the other day, and I believe it's now New York is around 0.2 or 0.3, meaning it almost takes 3 does to have one fawn make it through that hunting season. Now, why is that? There's some interesting research going on currently, looking at fawn stressors, but obviously fawning cover is crucial. Deer they're awesome species. What a doe does to abandon its fawn and leave it safe and keep it scent free and the whole thing, and the way that the fawn can blend in is fantastic if you got the right cover. Right. But that by far is cover. Everyone wants to put food plots in. Everyone wants to do this. Everyone wants to hang 300 stands, but it's cover. Pressure is what's going to really hurt your hunting the most. So whatever you can do to make those deer feel secure. On the average farm in New York, those deer aren't going to stay on your property. They're not. Maybe if you've got 2,000 acres, they're not going to, wander, but deer like to wander. They don't sit in front of a bowl of salad and eat all day. They go to here, to here, to here, to here, to the buffet. Yeah. That's what they do. So that's the way I always tell people to kind of look at the property. Go slow, take notes, think about cover, stand access. Some things I've done on my property, I've done a lot of timber stand. Probably one of the first things I did is I contacted my county forester. Mine happens to be Bryce June. Great guy, great forester. As a taxpayer, they will come out. Now, he can't mark my timber for timber sale. He can give you general guidance, but he's not going to give you the services that a private forester is going to give you. He can mark some wood for you for firewood. but he can walk the property with you, and he actually will write you a management plan, and he can talk to you about your goals. Now, it's going to be forestry minded, and there's going to be forestry practices that are solid, but you can find the right foresters and I have a private forester as well, and I have a good private forester that will take in my goals and also good timber stand management. So there is a blend. Everyone thinks it's one or the other. You can do a combination. The best deer habitats is a lot of chainsaw work, so it's not necessarily going to be the best for timber stand production, but there is a balance there. So that was one of the first things I did. And I did that because I was researching, there's some federal money out there that you can get through EQIP to help you with habitat projects. Well, you have to have a management plan. So I would definitely, if you have property and you're thinking about timber stand and you don't have a private forester, reach out to your regional DEC forester and say, hey, I understand you can, do a management plan for me. Could we walk the woods? I walked with Bryce, and this was, I don't know, probably year 1 or 2 after I got the place. I learned a ton just walking.
Yeah.
Just walking the stands and learning about trees, learning about what a tree is worth, why it's not, different species, just a plethora of information. They're just a great resource. So that's a really good thing that you can do, and I would highly recommend that as well. Obviously, the deer steward classes would be a great thing, just absorbing as much material as you possibly can. But I think, the projects that I've done has been heavily based on timber stand improvement. I've done some scrag sale. I've done a lot of pallet cuts and some low-grade white pine and that kind of stuff to get it off. I haven't done a hardwood timber sale. I've done some hop pulls. That's cool to know that some of the logs out of this place are actually growing some beer hops now.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So, I've done that kind of stuff. I'm probably about 5 to maybe 7 years away from a good commercial cut, depending on the market. I'm not gonna sell if it's really low. A tree that's growing is making you money, so why not hurry there? But timber stand is definitely where it's at. A deer is from your head down, so that's what you need to think about. When you walk through your woods and it looks like a park, you don't want it to look like a park. You want to walk into your woods and not be able to see past 20 feet when there's no leaves on the ground. Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of guys don't like that. A lot of guys don't, they'll have people come in and they'll cut a timber cut, but then they want someone to come in and cut all the firewood.
All the tops up.
Yeah, from the tops out. Well, those tops are offering browse. More importantly, it's cover. It's nesting habitat. It might actually provide a bear den for a bear. But also it's a natural fence. It allows those saplings that are growing. The deer necessarily can't get all the way in there, so it's gonna protect them. So having structure in the woods and cover is absolutely key. So I've done a lot of that work. I do have food plots. I've planted apple trees. I've released a lot of the apple trees that I had naturally, which, you just want to think about the way the sun comes up and cut the competition away so the tree gets good light. Learning how to prune an old apple tree, which pruning is an art and a science. With old apple trees, you want to do a third at a time.
Can we spend a little time on apple trees?
We can.
Because that's something right now so everything you just said, all the stuff you're talking about, it's very interesting because we've just gone through a second straight season on my in-laws' farm that has been very low. It hasn't been very productive. And we've spent more time than ever on food plots. We have, we've spent almost all of our energy on food plots, clearing areas for food plots, putting food plots in. We live in Wyoming County. There's freaking food everywhere as far as crops. So we have taken a big step back and said we need to create some cover, because what's happened is this farm 10 years ago was actively pasture, dairy, cows, and now it's just cash crop. So you've got fields, hedgerows have been taken out, and you have these areas that used to be goldenrod and old apple trees and things like that. It's grown up. We have a lot of ash, we have buckbrush, we've got some poplar, but it's mainly ash and buckbrush have just, and honeysuckle. Those three have just taken over. And it's funny because it's funny and it's not funny. We all are paying, myself and Dallas in particular, are paying a ton of attention to podcasts and watching videos and trying to educate ourselves. And then it happens right under our nose where it's this has gotten out of control. So now we were out there last weekend walking around last Saturday, and you just start, now that you're looking for buckbrush and ash and honeysuckle, it's like, oh my God, there's a lot of it. And you start thinking about, so I went back and I was looking at historical aerial photos, because I've been with my wife since 2012, so not even 10 years yet. I've never known the farm for what it used to be when there was cows on it, and it was more pasture than it was anything. And it's incredible to see what it looked like in 1995 compared to 2021. Mm-hmm. And the areas that Brian and Dallas are telling me that there used to just be stacks of deer. Like, you could go sit this one stand at night and there would just be, you'd have piles of deer coming out. That doesn't happen anymore. But because those areas have totally filled in, so now you got snow on the ground. We didn't have snow most of deer season, but you got snow on the ground now. Goldenrod that is there is laid down, and it's just like, it's freaking wide open. There's nothing to eat. There's no browse. There's no nothing. So we're like in this process exactly where you're talking. So the apple tree stuff is super interesting to me, because they've got some really like some hardy looking old apple trees that you can tell because of the competition of the other trees that they've like shot straight up. I mean, big trees, apple trees that are still alive, but they're not producing because they're getting choked out of sunlight.
Yes,
so,
with the apple trees, new wood makes apple trees. Old wood doesn't. I shouldn't say apple trees, apples. So it's the new wood. It's that's why pruning is important. You're generating new wood that's then going to allow it to bud to make apples. So the hedgerow that's over here to the south there's an apple tree that's over 90 foot tall in that stand.
Kidding.
It's crazy. You know, there's no branches to get all the way up to the crown, and I haven't been. I try to stay out of that area. It's
when
not
they
really,
hit the ground. It's
not really a sanctuary. It's kind of a
apples.
bedding area, so I guess we can call it a sanctuary. But I don't go over there that often during fruit season to see if it's dropping. But it's just crazy. So yeah, I mean, regenerating old apple trees. I mean, they're there, right? Why not take care of them now?
So to you, walk through the steps. I'm assuming it would be. So I asked this question of Ben Williams. He was doing a live video last week, and I asked him this question. But I'm curious, from your perspective with what you've done here, I'm sure you had a similar situation. You had some apple trees that needed to be released. You talked about that term. So, like, talk through that. Is it a multi-year process that you look at it, or is it you can go hog wild?
No, it should be 1 year. It should be a multi-year process. This is based on again of what I've learned, and basically I'll identify the tree, and typically I'll mark them on. Well, back then we didn't have the fancy Onyx, that we have now, but it was GPS. When I was first learning the property, I would throw surveying tape on them. So like mental note, this is here, and get to it when I can. But the first thing you can do, and you can do this any time of the year, the first step to release the tree, So, you want to think about how the sun rises and how it sets. So anything that's not on the north side of the tree and is going to create shade to that tree, cut it down. Chainsaw is the best tool that we have for apple trees and for not only deer, but any habitat species. Yeah. It is by far the best thing. It's also the most dangerous. So I got to say, you got to be wearing your gear. There's classes out there. There's the, and I'm going to draw a blank here what they call it. There's a chainsaw safety class that the group in New York teaches. It's really good. Kip has actually taken it and just raved about the class. Yeah. So we'll make a mental note to try to bring that up. Maybe it'd be good another addition for one of your podcasts to get those guys on.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
But chainsaws are great. But let's for the weekend warrior, I mean, it's just be just be conscious, right?
Go out there trying to hinge cut things like a hero, and you got trees and shit falling on your head, and literally I've had it happen.
Yeah. So there's an apple tree just to the south there that you can see right along the road, and it's not the best example, but I've done some work on that one there, and that did have competing stuff on the side. So even though it's next to the road, deer still come up to it and use it. It's an apple tree. I wanted to keep it going, so I cut all the brush away. I keep getting the grapevines out of it. Putting lime down is good. Now, there's been research when it comes to acorns and liming, it makes no difference. Don't spend your money. But with an apple tree, absolutely, and you can just get ground lime or pelletized lime and just the drip line. That's where the roots are. You look at the tree, you look at the branches, the roots are going to come out to the same area basically. And, typically the same length, but you don't even really have to, with lime, you don't even have to put it in the ground. Just putting it on top, it's going to absorb in. That's going to help you. Keeping the vegetation down underneath the tree is going to help. You don't want it to be bare dirt because you want it to retain moisture. You don't want to have pests in there like voles, mice, those type of things. But just kind of keeping it cut down if you can. But by far, the competition you want with an apple tree, you want sun is the number one. and airflow. You want good air movement through the tree. So releasing an apple tree, it sounds like you're releasing it within. You're just giving it room to grow and giving it more light and air is all you're really doing. Then that can be done any time of the year. Same with a lime. You can go throw a lime out right now. Yeah, we're going to get run off with the snow, but if you can get it done now, do it now. Like, it's not going to hurt you. And for the average mature apple tree, I would probably, you could do the calculation of how many square feet, and, you don't need to do a pH test. Most likely it's going to need some lime, especially if it's been dropping apples and stuff. It's going to be acidic there,
right?
Most likely. So I would probably put like a half a bag, 20 pounds or so, just sprinkle it around. You're not going to want to get it on the tree. You're not going to want to have it just sit in one spot. You want to move it around so the moisture can get in the ground. And then it should be really a 3-year process. And, you can remove dead wood at any time, but you really want to prune an apple tree when the tree is dormant. So right now, it is a whopping 18 degrees is the perfect time because that tree is dormant. You need so many cold days for an apple tree to be dormant. If you prune a tree in the summertime or spring or even late fall, but early fall, if you prune that tree, whether it's an old tree or a tree that you planted, it's going to spurt a growth cycle. That tree should be shutting down and going into sleep mode. It's the bear that's going to go into hibernation. When you prune a tree, it's stimulating growth and stuff. So you really want to do it now, and you can safely, in my opinion, through March, and you're going to be fine. You don't want to do it later than that. You can if you have to, but you're really getting into kind of the danger zone in terms of that. So, and I always say doing 1/3 at a time is the general rule of thumb. Pruning is an art and a science. And I am not a master pruner. We could go to a tree and one of it might look solid, and I could show you a demonstration and you'd be like, oh, Mike's a rock star. We could go to the next tree, and I'd sit there and I'd scratch my head. I'd be like, I don't know, but there's some general principle. Remove the dead wood. Remove anything that's growing straight up. They call it like a rain sprout. It's going just straight up off the limb. You can get rid of that. You can cut those at any time of the year. Pruning will make those grow. So if you do prune, that happens, don't be alarmed. But those can be taken out. And then I like the rule of thumb, especially on an older tree, 1/3 a year. And if you can look at it and remember sunlight and airflow. And then my other advice would be, and this is really hard probably just on a podcast, but one bigger cut is bigger than 15 smaller cuts. So if you're looking at a branch, you have the central leader of the tree. That's from the roots going straight up. That's your central leader. Generally speaking, if you have a branch that is equal or larger than the diameter of your central leader, that should come out. So if you're looking at a branch,
the branch is bigger than your central leader should.
Yeah, usually it's not going to get bigger than that. I guess it could happen if the tree got morphed or something, but for the most part, that really shouldn't happen. But if it's that's like 80% of the diameter of the main trunk and the central leader of that tree, you should probably take that out. And it's easier to do one good cut than to do a bunch of small cuts to get the same thing. So, and you'd really have to, there's some great resources if you do some Google searches to actually look at the angles of cuts and how that can promote new growth, because that's what you want. You want that airflow and that sunlight. Even commercial orchards, and I looked into my history of apple trees came about where I knew basically nothing about apple trees, and I got interested in it from buying my farm and wanting to get involved with apple trees, releasing apple trees, and I actually planted and grown. I currently have, I think, 36 that I've planted, and they're all doing great. But I learned from another QDMA member, George Clifford out of Vermont. He runs a commercial orchard, and learned a ton with him. Absolute ton from him, and we actually co-authored an article in Quality Whitetails. So one of those issues over there is an article from me, and I'm actually doing the Beer and Deer series not in February, but in March is going to be on deer. So I'll be doing for National Deer Association a talk on apple trees. We're going to kind of go through a lot of the stuff with rootstocks and pruning and site selection and why I did this, and it should be a pretty informative conversation. So you should check that out. If you go to the deerassociation.com and then just look for Beer and Deer, it'll bring you to the schedule, and you can pre-register. It's free, so check that out. But getting back to the pruning, my evolution of apple trees, I came from not knowing anything to really becoming passionate to it, and to the point where I was growing almost commercial grade apples, and it was really kind of cool. So, but the pruning, again, it's an art and a science. You definitely have to have a visual, maybe it'd be one of those things that we should consider, the Rochester area, maybe we consider doing a pruning demo,
Yeah.
That'd
be awesome.
Because it's definitely something that's hard. You can screw things up. But if you're going to release the tree, release it, cut the dead wood out. That can be done any time of the year. And then just slowly look at the tree and say, okay, I should take out 30% of the branches, just do 10% of those branches. Then try to go for the bigger ones. Remember your light and air, and you'll be in the right direction. So, and the only thing I'd like to say probably on that is when you're making your cuts, remember if you have especially a bigger branch and you're going to cut, it's going to probably rip the bark. So just doing a simple relief cut closer to the tree from underneath with your pruning saw, and most of us are probably using pole saws, gas powered chainsaw type. Make a simple cut underneath and then move up a little bit further and then make your cut. So then that branch comes and rips. It's not going to rip to your bark.
Yep.
And then you definitely want to get your cut close to if you're just making a clean cut and not wanting new growth coming out, you can do a clean cut along the tree. You just want to really be careful not to damage the bark on the tree, on the central leader and stuff. But apple trees are awesome, man. It adds variety.
Yeah.
It's soft mast. It's obviously all wildlife love apple trees. So
we've been planting a bunch of oaks. Brian, he's been focused heavily on that, and we've kind of all become a little bit obsessed with it. We're collecting acorns throughout the fall, and we keep them in Ziploc bags throughout the winter with a little. Brian he's got like gallon bags full of acorns, and I've a little bit smaller scale, but I've got a gallon Ziploc bag with a wet paper towel in there, and the acorns are just laying in there with the wet paper towel, keeping them moist, and it seems to work pretty well. And then in the spring, we put them in solo cups and get the trees going, and then I think Brian, the ones that we've been planting at the farm, he's kept them going in a solo cup to get them going for a year, and then we're planting them in their second spring. Is when we've been planting them, and those are going well. We're putting them in the tubes. They're probably 5-6 foot tall tubes, so that's going really well. But something new this year is going to be planting apple trees. So we've got an area that has been a big food plot that we're talking about converting from a food plot into more of a brush lot and plant some oak trees and apple trees in there. Mm-hmm. So you got any suggestions for successfully planting apple trees, especially from seedlings?
So seedlings I've not done, and it is definitely hard to plant apple trees from seeds. It's all based on the rootstock.
When I say seedlings, he's got them started, so they're in cups and they're going. So their root system is established, and
So I've always bought from commercial nurseries, but one thing you want to keep. Pardon?
Isn't that cheating?
No. Not with apple trees.
Okay.
Because you don't just growing from seed, and even if you got them started, you don't necessarily know what you're going to get and what the rootstock is going to be and how long and if it'll produce apples. So, rootstocks.
I'm busting your chops, by the way, on cheating because I don't care how you do it. You get a tree to go.
Yeah. So the rootstock is essentially what kind of roots it is, and there's different kinds. So we're going to just use an example. You go to a big box store, whether it's Lowe's or Home Depot, and they have an apple tree. Most likely that's going to be a dwarf tree. That's intended for the home gardener, where you're going to plant it, it's going to grow 9 to 10 feet and going to produce apples quickly. That's going to get decimated in the deer woods.
Right.
So you want a B118 or even an MLA 11. You want one of those rootstocks. And you can look up rootstocks of apple trees and it'll give you the descriptions. But that actually is going to tell you how long it's going to take you to have apples. It's also going to tell you how big the tree is going to grow. So I've done a lot of 118s down below. I've done a lot of MLA 7s down below. So those trees are probably 15 to, some of them might be closer to 20 feet. They're pretty much maxed out.
Yeah.
But you got to remember with an apple tree, if you're going to plant it, it's going to get decimated. Even deer, I watch them all the time. They stand on their hindquarters to get to the browse. Not only the apples, but they love it, right? It's tender. It's great. It tastes good. It's full of protein. They love it. So you're going to be growing from above your head and on. So understanding rootstocks is definitely key. The other that's crucially important is picking a variety that is disease resistant. There's multiple diseases out there with apple trees. And, if you want to grow a tree and you're not going to consume any apples, you don't care what it looks like. The deer doesn't care what it looks like. But if you get disease hardy or disease resistant trees, they're just going to produce more for you. They're going to be a little bit easier to grow. So I would highly suggest to educate yourself on those type of apples. I have experience with Gold Rush, which is kind of it's a cross between an apple and a crab. It tastes terrible. It's a late dropping one. When I planted, and I had to educate all myself on this. I wanted apples to drop from like the end of September, beginning of October, all the way through to January, because I wanted it for hunting to be a draw, but also to provide some soft mast, another, line on the buffet line for them. That's what I wanted to do it. So I have Enterprise down there. I have some Crimson Golds. I have Honeycrisp down there, which I love Honeycrisp. It's my favorite apple in the world. Enterprise, Gold Rush, Crimson Golds. I'm trying to think if there's another. Liberty is the other variety. You can't see them, but on the other side of that building there's 2 trees, and then I have I did a demo with the trellis planting because I was going to get in the orchard business. I was going to do a high density trellis planting, so I have some Fuji's planted on that. Those are all B19 on a trellis, steel wire going through to support it. They're planted literally a foot apart, but you're trying to get mass production on a small scale and have it manageable, for a couple guys to do the work and not have a full-fledged, orchard going on. So I've done a lot of tinkering with the apple trees. But when I looked at my site down there, I chose an inside corner. And I chose that area, one, because of wind and because of stand access. But I wanted to put my trees, rather than have them kind of just like, I wanted this to be a draw. I wanted to make it something where the deer were going to come and be around. And deer love orchards, not only from, I don't know what it is about orchards. I guess it's probably the food that draws them there, right? But most orchards that you go through, or if you find guys that have planted multiple trees in an area, the activity that you see, from droppings to tracks to rubs, which I protect my trees from rubs, scraping activity. It is like
under those limbs.
It's like the Grand Central Station, if you will, down there. It truly is. During the rut, it's absolutely insane.
You're seeing deer from all over the damn place.
And I think partly, obviously, it's the food, but there's just so much deer sign there that it's just really great. So I kind of picked it in a spot where I thought, you know what, this makes sense. I didn't want to just plant them all over. I want them to be condensed. So I have 8 trees in a row. I have 3 rows of trees in this one particular section. And then I added a couple more on the ends, is how I planted them. I thought about my spacing mainly from the tree performance, about how wide the limbs are going to grow. Also consider your equipment that you got to get through there if you're going to maintain and mowing and that type of thing. Some guys plant clover underneath them. When it comes to sprayings, obviously bees love clover, and some apple trees you got to spray. You got to look at the labels and educate yourself. When it comes to spraying, it's not good for you, and you can't get some of the stuff in New York legally. Even stuff that is legal, though, you can have a detrimental effect on the bees if you're spraying and you planted clover on there, and the clover is flowered. It's going to drift on there. Yes, you're going to. Normally you don't spray pesticide on a apple tree until it's done flowering. It's at least 90% petal fall. So if you're going to plant stuff underneath, and I've had clover under my apple trees, but I tend not to spray anymore. It's not worth the time and the energy for the deer, really. But keeping the bugs and stuff off. If I get a bad outbreak of tent caterpillars or whatever, then you're going to have to spray. So not having a flowering species growing underneath your apple trees will be good. Not have to worry about that. So. But I did space out my trees, and now when I'm pruning, I think about a hunting situation. Okay, I have 2 stands around this orchard, and I kind of think about where the deer travel, and I try to figure, okay, it's primarily archery. I need to have the limbs cut here. I like to keep limbs because of scrapes, and there's scrapes that get used year after year down there. Great places to put trail cameras to get inventory. So that's just how I basically did it. Some other considerations when you're picking apple trees is cross-pollination. I would probably say for us in Western New York, and probably all of New York State, because there's so many apples in New York, you probably don't have to worry about cross-pollination too much for the most part. And I'm not an expert in it, but I do understand it. And it's basically different varieties and different things that bloom at different times. Different pollens can help pollinate other trees. Okay. And the bees are what pollinates our trees. So when I set up my orchard, it was mainly the site first, and then selection, then setting it up and for the future. So I bought them from a commercial orchard nursery supply, and they were basically whips, meaning that they had roots established, and it was just a long central leader, about your pinky in diameter, and about 36 inches tall. And I planted them now, and this was probably 9 years ago. Now they're 15 feet tall. Apples every year. They're huge. If you walk down there, you'd be like, wow. And if I showed you a picture of what it started out, it was literally like taking a ruler stick, a 3-foot ruler, and sticking it in the ground. That's what it looked like.
Yeah.
Just a whip. They call them whips.
Yeah.
And
That's
now
really cool
there's
to
these
see
monstrous trees.
develop,
When I first planted the apple tree, you don't want to J-root them. You want to bowl them out. You don't want to make sure the roots are going to be jade. You want them to be nice. I mixed in some peat moss and a little bit of lime and some good topsoil with your native topsoil. Make sure that there was no air pockets, tamped them down really good. I use window screen. If you envision a pencil sticking out of the ground or your yardstick, and you're going to take regular window screen. You're going to fold the window screen around the tree, and you're going to use a paper stapler. You're not stapling the wood. You're just stapling the window screen together. It's closed. Mice and voles love to chew on the apple tree, and that's what will kill an apple tree. There's also some boring insects that'll get in there and kill that young apple tree. So that's how I protected the young apple trees. The tree wraps that we talked about they're using for your oaks, they're great for sun and stuff. They're generally not recommended for apple trees.
Okay.
But definitely doing the window screen will help. Staking the tree well and getting it done, making sure the water is essential. The first couple of years, you don't want it to produce apples. The first 2 or 3 years, you want it to grow roots. If it's going to grow apples, it's going to take away its nutrients and its energy to produce roots. You really want roots. You'll make up for it in years down. So you should really pinch the flowers off, essentially. But there's other things
so you're kind of just getting the flowers, the buds off of it. Once it's
and that way they're not going to waste any energy making the fruit. There's some things that you can do in terms of training in an apple tree, and then you can look this up. There's some good videos out there, but you can, if you have an apple tree that's not producing and it's relatively still young and you think it should be, you can do some things to help it to flower. And that's mainly if you get the branch that's coming out, if you get it bent down. You have to do it gently. You don't want to break the branch. It's easier to train apple trees when they're young and they're fresh and nimble. But I just use 12 gauge like electrical wire that they would use on electric fences. You can just cut it with a pair of dikes, make a shepherd's hook on both ends around the central leader of the tree, pull the branch down and bend it down. So envision the central leader going up the tree, your branch is coming off, and then it's going to dip down towards the ground. That end of that branch is going to go down. What that does is it creates the hormones to get into the branch and stay at that part, and it actually forces a tree to flower. So there's other things you can do with clothespins when the branches first start to come out on your whip and the tree is young, to get the angles right, because you don't want your central leader going straight up is what you want. Your branches coming out, you don't want them to go straight up. You don't necessarily want them to come straight out at a 45 either. You want them to kind of come out at a nice angle. Think about this branch is going to grow, eventually be 50 pounds of apples on it. You want it to be strong.
Yeah.
So there's some things you can do there really to help. But keeping the deer off of them is absolutely key. So in my orchard, I got green T-posts, and I had a wooden gate and everything that you can open in and out. This fence was 10 foot tall. I used cattle fence at the bottom. I used green T-posts, heavy-duty ones, pounded them in. Then I took 10-foot pieces of conduit, and I used zip ties. I did a lot of work on my apple trees.
Wow, Jesus.
So I had conduit going up, and then I used, to make up the fence, I used chicken wire.
Yeah.
To go around. And I had a gate where I could walk in and out of there, do my maintenance. And I just at that time, to keep things mowed down, I just kept a push mower down there that I covered up with the tarp and stuff. But obviously deer are going to decimate those young apple trees. So keeping the deer off them is key.
I wonder about, because we're going to be doing a lot of cutting, dragging some brush out and building up brush piles around, kind of to deter the deer a little bit from getting at the trees that we're trying to grow.
Yeah.
I don't know if that would make any sense.
You could try
Instead
that.
Of trying to fence it in, because I could see that being a huge problem for us trying to grow apple trees there.
Yeah.
Is trying to keep the deer out.
Yep. Yeah. It's definitely the thing. I mean, you can, I've seen people, and I've done this, like when I planted the last 2 trees that were planted down there, I added them when those other trees were already past the point of the deer were going to really cause them any harm. And it's going to, if a deer gets to your tree, unless he's de-leaving the whole thing, it's not going to kill the tree. It's going to stun it a little bit. Mm-hmm. But those branches that are really low, eventually you're going to cut those out. So by year 3 or so, you can probably start cutting those branches down low. You don't want to cut them too fast because it's absorbing light and energy, so it's helping the tree grow as long as it's not producing apples. But eventually you're going to want those branches. And if you walk down there with me, most of the stuff from your chest height is already cut. There's definitely some branches that the deer can still get to, and it's mainly because of scraping activity. Yeah. That I want them there. No harm in that tree whatsoever. obviously, anytime the bark is opened or a tree is browsed, it puts it at a little bit of risk for some disease and stuff. But they're going to be fine. You're not, we're not producing apples for Wegmans. It's for the deer herds.
Yeah.
So those 2 last trees that I planted, to get back to my point, I just used conduits pretty cheap. You can cut them in half and have some pretty good posts. They'll absorb a post driver pretty easy, and just some fencing and just go around. Most deer are, if you do just a circle around your tree, and I can't remember if it was 16 or 22 feet that I cut, and then I just wrapped it around the tree and wired it together. Most of those deer aren't going to jump in to get into a singular tree to do that, because it's too condensed around the branches anyway, but it keeps them off a little bit. So luckily, bear damage, I've only had really one bear come in. Actually got him on a cell camera, and it was just this past summer, the summer before, I had to run down there and shoo him off so he wouldn't break all the branches on the tree. But
you were posting quite a bit of pictures of
I
bears
had
this fall.
Lots of bears, actually 2 monster bears. I don't know if you saw the picture of those 2 bears. That was
the 2 bears fighting.
Yeah,
Did you have 2 bears?
That was in October. It was about 9 p.m. That was probably 300 yards from the house.
No shit.
Yep.
Yeah, those are
there.
2 big bears.
Those were big bears. Now, I had some friends, and I'm not a bear biologist, but could it have been a boar and a sow and she's protecting her cubs? Absolutely. But when I look at the size of both of those bears, it makes me think, wow, those are probably 2 male bears. They're very territorial.
Yeah.
Who really knows? But it was a really cool photo. But I could have shot a bear here this summer, probably for when we're sitting probably 600 yards down the hill. Saw the bear come in. It was a bear that I had on camera quite a bit, and it was during archery season. Came within 25 yards, but I've already taken 2 bears. One of them's above you there.
Yeah.
The other one is in the den, and it wasn't a big bear. It was an average, probably 175, 210-pound bear. About average for New York.
Yeah.
So I really had no interest. I just grabbed my phone, took pictures, some cool video, and I enjoyed that though. I was like, oh, this was an awesome hunt. It's really cool. And everyone I talked about it, they're like, why didn't you shoot it? Why didn't you shoot the bear? Like a bear, that'd be cool. And I've gotten one with my rifle. I've gotten one with my bow. I don't need to. Yeah. Now, if one of those monster bears came out, absolutely, because I was like, wow, those things are ginormous.
300-pounders all day.
Oh, those bears were, I'm guessing, 600 pounds. That one.
You think so?
I think so, yeah. That bear is huge. My buddy down the road saw that bear and has video of it, and it's ginormous. It's
unreal.
So, but apple trees are great, man.
I didn't realize you were the apple tree freaking. You're Dr. Johnny Appleseed.
Well, I don't know if I'd go that far, but
you know a hell of a lot more than I do.
Apple trees, I'll just warn people. Apple trees are great. They're absolutely great. They're a lot of work, and you just got to ask yourself. And it's investment from time and stuff. I definitely think it adds to what I've done. There's always deer there. There's still now. If we were to go down below, that's where you're going to see the most sign. And there's not been an apple tree down there in probably 2 months. The drought. The apples were small this year, and there weren't as many of them because of the drought.
Right.
But the deer activity still. I have a couple cell cameras there every night. There's pictures of deer in there. It's just crazy.
Yeah, I mean the amount of apple trees, and even if you just ignore the discussion about planting and trying to get them to go, the amount, if you walk property, especially an older piece of property that hasn't been heavily cut, almost everything's got apple trees on it. You walk a piece of property, you can almost always find apple trees, and a lot of times they're overgrown as far as what's around them. So that's what strongly interests us right now, is how to get our apple trees healthy and producing again.
Yep.
Because I think that would make a huge difference hunting wise on the property too. So
yeah, it's definitely. It's basically you've got something that's already there. It was probably planted by a cow or a bird.
Yeah.
Most likely many years ago, and certainly trying to get it refurbished and regenerated to grow. So releasing it, pruning it, liming it will definitely help. There's definitely some good resources. We're fortunate here in Western New York and New York State in general with Cornell. There's a lot of good apple mines out there. I've spent some time with the Cornell folks on a day going around when I was tinkering and thinking into the apple business, and there's a lot of good resources out there. So. But I would definitely add apple trees if I was to buy this place again or another piece of property and it didn't have apples on it. I would definitely plant like a little mini orchard and get it going, because it just adds so much, I think, to the property. Is it the silver bullet? No, but we're not looking for the silver bullets. We're looking for lots of bullets to fill those holes in the void of what your habitat needs. And I think it just adds another piece. And soft mass, the birds love it. Even coyotes eat apples.
Really?
I saw a picture. Yeah, coyotes eat fruit. A lot of people don't know that. Everyone thinks coyotes are big and bad and just eat deer, but that's not the case. There's a picture I saw it. I don't know where it was from, but I saw it on social media, I think on Instagram here in the last week or so. There's actually a picture of a coyote in an apple tree to get apples, up in the apple tree.
Come on.
Yeah. I didn't believe it, and I don't think it's photoshopped, and I was like, wow, that's pretty
Was
pretty
Bernie
cool.
Sanders sitting underneath it with his mittens on?
Yeah, there's some funny pictures of that, that's for sure. You saw the one with the bobcat and the coyotes in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, with him sitting there.
That was funny. Yeah.
The internet,
But,
I'll tell you. Well, we're on. I can't believe we're at 2 hours already.
Wow.
But there's a lot of things that I would love to talk to you about, and we'll continue to have to tap into your resource of knowledge.
Anytime. If anyone wants to learn more about the organization or get involved, shoot me an email. It's easy. It's mike@deerassociation.com. I am on Instagram. It's just Mike Edwards, and I think there's a period with a underscore, another period in between my names, but it should be pretty obvious when you see who I am, based on the content there, that it's me. I don't post a lot on there, but occasionally I post stuff on there. And if anyone needs anything or wants to get involved, reach out. We help everyone. We obviously will encourage you to be a member, but if you have a deer question or need something, I may not always have the answer, but we have the answers in the organization.
You're
for
the
sure.
Grassroots guy.
With the talent that we have,
right.
And that's what sets us apart. With Torrin Miller and Nick Penizzato coming on board, and then the other parts of the team that we've had in place with the organization. We're just a big, robust deer organization, and our volunteers, I can't say enough about them, the stuff they do in the community and all of the good work that they do and the education that they do. A lot of them, Ben's a great volunteer, he's involved, and he has a great new branch that's been going on, I think just now a couple of years, maybe 3, but volunteered at Rochester for a long time. Mm-hmm. He's giving back. He's promoting and helping his community, and that's really what it's about. And all of the volunteers are like that. I mean, it's just, they're great people, and people should consider getting involved, man. We got to do it. It's about the community and promoting our sport and keeping hunting alive.
Amen to that. That's what it's all about, man. And whatever I should go, I think but anything we can do from our end, whether it's doing podcast stuff like this or anything event wise, anything we can team up with you to help support that. Obviously, we're members, but I'd love to continue to help grow that. And as I've gotten more involved with the organization, and my first year in being the most jacked up year of my adult life, and everything that's gone on, I still feel like the organization brought value to me, and I can't wait for the days when we could go do field stuff, or we can have banquets and meet and network and learn.
Yeah.
I can't wait for that. So yeah, definitely whatever we can do to help, as you guys continue to grow and help the community here in New York State grow as well. So
Appreciate that, man.
yeah, thanks for having me to your house. Looks like the snow's intensifying, so I'm gonna jump on old 20A and drive right straight into it. So
yeah, white knuckles.
Yep, white knuckles. All right, thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, bud.
See ya. Fade 'em.